Michelle. Good morning, everyone. I will now call the hearing to order. I would like to begin by acknowledging that we are in Treaty 1 territory and the traditional homeland of the Métis Nation. This morning I will be chairing the hearing. My name is Robert Hutchings. On my direct left is Mr. Harden. On my far left is Ms. Nesbitt. Assessor for the City of Winnipeg is Mr. Baracus, and our secretary today is Ms. Yupin. We will be hearing applications for revision of the assessment roll in accordance with the Municipal Assessment Act. The matters for which revision is requested have been described in each application, and we will limit discussion to those matters. The statements that applicants or the assessor make at this hearing are sworn testimony, and anyone speaking to the matters must be sworn in. Be advised that comparisons of assessments of properties are not considered evidence of market value by the Board of Revision. The Board of Revision is appointed annually by Council and is independent of it and the City Administration. It makes its decisions on the basis of the evidence provided at this hearing and issues a written order that will be mailed to all parties as soon as possible. Please note that the Board's decisions with respect to an application may be appealed to the Manitoba Municipal Board if the matter pertains to assessed value or classification, or to Court of Queen's Bench if the matter pertains to the application of exemptions from taxation. Should you wish to appeal, information on how to do so will be included with the Board's order. With respect to the hearing process, I will confirm the matters to be addressed with each applicant following the swearing in. We will then have the assessor's testimony followed by questions that the applicant and the panel may have, and then the applicant's testimony followed by questioning again by the appellant and then the assessor and then the board members. Each side will have an opportunity to summarize if they wish. Once all the evidence about an application has been brought forward, the applicant may leave. The process will repeat for each item on the docket today. The session will close after all the applications have been heard, and the board will deliberate in private and make its decisions. You will receive the order by registered mail as soon as possible. As information, all public hearings are live streamed, recorded, and will be part of the public record. And can everybody please make sure their cell phones are on complete silence?
Wait, not off, just complete silence?
Okay. Yeah, we'll leave it at that, too. Except yours.
No,
It's gotta be off.
Actually, you have to turn it into me.
Yeah. There's a long one.
every time we go to prison, they make me do that.
Same thing here.
Okay, Michelle, could you please swear in the parties, and we will get started.
Your name, do you swear in or affirm? Affirm? Can you state your full name, please? Do you affirm that the evidence you're about to give at this hearing should be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but?
Yes.
Can you state your full name, please?
Rocky Newfeld?
Do you affirm that the evidence you're about to give at this hearing should be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Do.
Good morning, Mr. Newfeld, Mr. Baracus. First property on the docket is 450 River Road. We are dealing with a 2020 realty assessment. Mr. Baracus, when you are ready, please.
Just before you start, I'm sorry to interrupt, but
Okay.
there are two parties representing different interests in the property, and if the assessor reads his evidence, is he just gonna do it once, or is he gonna repeat for the next appeal? I just wanna know what the procedure is gonna be.
I guess he can do a quick, we'll enter the roll number and everything. Is Mr. Betker gonna come up in the second part?
At some point, yeah, and maybe, I'm just wondering if you wanna swear him in, just so he's just like ready to go and jump into the action.
Okay.
But he's
Yeah,
got
and then I don't have to hear
Tag
it again.
team wrestling, he's got.
You wanna come forward, Mr.
Sure.
Betker? Thanks.
2-on-1, man.
I've got a partner here too.
Okay, wait, now, if we're doing tag team, you take him on.
I was gonna take the other way.
Can you state your full name, please?
Douglas Metro.
Do you swear that the evidence
Hey,
you're about
you
to give
both
at this
got two
hearing
small
should be the truth,
partners.
the whole
How's
truth,
that?
and nothing but the truth?
Thank you.
Okay. Morning, Doug.
Morning.
Okay, 450 River Road. Mr. Baracus, when you're ready, please.
Okay. Roll number 08-00539, 0500, 450 River Road. Pardon me. It's a personal care home located bank of the Red River there, just west of where River Road and McNulty Crescent meets. 3 stories, effective year built 1988 to 2007, reinforced concrete frame, 9 to 10 foot wall height, zoned RMFS on the land. We have the actual land. I have to make a note here on the brief on page 1. Where it says land area, it says 224,000 square feet. That's what we have it, that's the assessed land area. The actual land area, 282, 373. So we assessed less of the land than what is actually included within the boundaries of the parcel. Gross floor area, 86,000, 463. Go to page, what I have marked as page 3, you'll see some photographs of the property. Then if you go to page 4, you'll see the zoning map. So you see that around it, it's mostly R1 zoning. Our subject is RMFS, intended to accommodate development of multifamily units, including apartments, condos, in the neighborhoods with medium to high residential densities. Page 5 and page 6 are some descriptions to the 3 approaches of value on this property. So if you go to page 6, you'll see we've applied the cost approach to this property. It's a personal care home. Special use buildings do not frequently transact in the open market, so the sales comparison approach will not be used. In the past, the city has collected income from personal care homes in Winnipeg. The data is regarded as incomplete and inadequate. To supply the department with sufficient evidence, information to compile accurate evaluations using the income approach. So for this reason, the department is using a cost approach. We've used a cost approach for a while on these things. So valuation summary here on page 7 is what we're looking at. Once we take off depreciation and add the depreciated cost of detached structures and the land value, we come up with our value of $14,661,000. So if you go to page 8, there is our cost summary with our depreciation off of it. Page 9, our land sale comparables. So we've got 4 comparables. They range on a sale price per square foot of $13.69 to, pardon me, $26.95. So looking at the comparables, the photos are found. Comparable 1, Beaver Hill. See, it's below our table there. Comparable 2 on Roblo on the next page on page 10. So in regards to these comparables, there's 2 groups. So we look at the sale price per square foot. There's the first 2 comparables, which are 13 to 15. And you see that they are, based on their shape, they're more square, rectangle, short rectangle shaped, more suited for properties such as the subject. Comparables 3 to 4, you can tell these were under replot. These are older pictures after they purchased it. They were made into single-family dwellings. So in terms of coming up with our valuation, comparables 1 and 2 is what I would put my weight on. I wouldn't consider 3 and 4, just due to the shape being so much different than the subject. So we're at, we're 1369, 1538, sale price per square foot. And, pardon me, for our breakdown here, of our land, let's find where this is. So on page 12, you'll see at the bottom table, well, first of all, the table at the top shows the detached structures, sheds, chain link fence, depreciated. So those depreciated values were added to the depreciated values of the building. On the table on the bottom, land valuation, you'll see we're using 1717 per square foot. 1724 on the exempt should be 1717 rather. And then we're using 1717 on the taxable portion. So our comps range from 1369 to 1538. Neither one of our land sale comps are on the river. Properties on the river more attractive than properties not on the river. There's a level of privacy. It's nice. People like river lots. So, given that it's only $2 a square foot above comparable 1 and 2, it doesn't seem to be outside of what it would go for reasonably. So page 13 just shows the breakdowns of the exemptions. So on the land, we've got 3 sections. We've got taxable, we've got fully exempt, and then we have on line 3, we've got no school tax. So it'll be easier to start from the bottom of that chart. The bottom, if you turn to my page 15, there's some excerpts from the Municipal Assessment Act. So the bottom, exemption from school taxes. Says subject to 25 and 26, exempt from taxation for school purposes where the real property is owned or by, is and held in trust for and used by a charitable organization primarily for the purpose of giving relief to the aged, indigent, sick persons to a maximum exemption of 0.81 hectares. There should be another point there under 23.1, but it's A. You'll see it in my other briefs. I don't know why this one wasn't included here. It says a personal care home. So personal care homes get the same school exemption. That blurb is included in the briefs you're going to see for the rest of the day, just to back up what I am saying right now. So we've used the 0.81 hectares, and then we've assigned that exemption to the area. Anything above that is taxable on the personal care home property. So we're looking at a personal care home property here. The exempt section on the land on page 13 on line 2, fully exempt 3364. There's a religious area, so they're fully exempt from taxation. So that's why that portion is tax exempt. The buildings, the detached structures, they are within the threshold on the building section, so they fall within the threshold of the school exemption area, the 0.81 hectares, so they're school exempt as well. we've attributed all of the building outside of the church area to school exemptions. The church area gets a full exemption, the building. So when we look at our summary, we add it all up, and then that's how we come up with our totals. So page 16 shows just a bit of a description of the place. Action Marguerite, San Vital, 154 bed accredited personal care home with 39 specialized dementia care, 39 bed specialized dementia care units within the personal care home. So that's another level of personal care. And then we just have extras from the Municipal Assessment Act. Then the last two pages are just briefs, rather board of revision orders, showing last time that the value was confirmed. Well, slightly, take this one. Looks like for on page 19, from 13,546,000 to 13,551,000, pretty much the same thing. For 2018, and then 2016, 17, there was a recommendation to decrease the property by the assessment department that was accepted by the board. 13,146. So we're at 14,661. We're pretty close. They used our cost approach. That's my evidence. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Barakis.
It's written on the back of yours.
Okay.
All figures here.
Mr. Neufeld, any questions of the assessor's evidence first?
Yes. Your comparables, you said that you were relying most on number 1 and number 2. What are their zoning?
RMFS.
Both RMFS. Okay. And do they both have access to street?
By the pictures, yes.
And at the time of sale, have their development fees been paid?
I do not have that information.
Were they subdivided and ready to develop? They're not part of any other lot, are they?
Not as far as I know.
And the date of sale, were these impact fees paid? Or was this predating impact fees?
Oh, I don't have that information.
Are any of them affected by setbacks?
I'm not sure.
Well, okay. In subject lands, are zoned as well RMF, correct?
Yes, this one is RMFS.
And is a personal care home an approved use in RMF land?
I don't have the zoning chart on me. The zoning information says development of multi-family units, including apartments and condominiums. They note that specifically. I know for these, there's also, if you look in the zoning bylaw, there's some conditional uses. So there's other things which can be built on if approved.
Well, I'm looking at the principal use table, and it says permitted with a, quote, with an asterisks. So that would indicate that there's conditions that have to be required, perhaps variances that have to be granted.
Could be, yeah.
And are you familiar with the setbacks from RMF to R1 lands?
No, I'm not.
Okay, there's a special boundary provision. Are you familiar with that? Is the subject property, how many titles comprise the subject property?
I don't have that information.
Well, it's in the notice of assessment. There'll be a, or if you have a tax bill over notice of assessment, it'll say how many titles are on it, correct? I have it in front of me here. It is merely Lot 1, Plan 19929, which is one title. Do you disagree with that?
I don't have any information.
Where is this excess land?
Excess land?
Yes.
That would be towards the river.
Okay, so you don't have a good picture of it. I see you cut it off. I'm gonna refer to my picture on page 2. Are you saying that it's the land that's south of the second structure?
Yes.
Okay. And did you consider the river setback in your calculations?
I didn't do the calculations on this property.
Do you know if the subject land at the back can be subdivided?
Towards the river?
Yes, do you think the concept of excess land, is this lot possible to be subdivided? Well, let's start easier. It hasn't been, but, correct?
It hasn't been subdivided, no.
And is it fair to say that if you wanted to have it subdivided, there's a process to go through and you would need to obtain approval?
Yeah, yeah.
And were it to be subdivided, there are dedication fees to be paid? Are you familiar with that concept?
No.
So it's 10% of the value of the newly created lot. You aware of that?
No.
And the impact fees, we are dealing with physical issues as of date of appeal. The impact fees are in place, correct? They're in they're somewhere, abeyance, they're stuck in the courts right now.
Mr. Neufeld, you're presenting evidence here.
I just want to make sure we have the dates correct, so there's not a dispute.
Okay, but
Is
you could present
the
that.
assessor aware that there's a concern that impact fees must be paid?
No.
Are you aware that service fees will have to be paid?
In terms of putting in a subdivision?
In terms of servicing the lot, which would be connecting to the city waste and water and land drainage systems.
Yeah, I would assume so.
So that's someone's gonna have to pay that in order to bring this land to market where it's able to, is that correct?
You're referring to the excess land?
Yes.
right? Yeah.
Okay. You haven't considered those costs in your analysis, have you?
We haven't assessed the land towards the river.
You've compared an unsubdivided piece of land against two lots that are ready, shovel-ready, as we call it in the business. Is that not correct?
I believe you're referring to the land tucked in behind the property?
Yes.
That we haven't assessed. Well, there's the assessed section, the 224, up towards the road where there are services. I think you're referring to in behind, if they were trying to fit something in behind.
No, I'm referring to the subject excess land. You're suggesting, I heard earlier that you were talking about a great place for single-family homes along the river. Did you not say that?
There's some right next door, yeah.
And your comparables are multifamily developments. So in order to put that on this property, my question was there any consideration for all the fees associated with getting that development going?
I'm sure they'd consider that, yeah.
And did not your comparison of land values deal with a property that's unsubdivided without fees being paid compared against lots that had been subdivided and are shovel-ready, which means ready to be built on? You said earlier that you took 3 pictures, when there was still vacant land, and now there's buildings on them.
Well, that's 3 and 4. I'm putting my weight on comparables 1 and 2.
Which to your knowledge are ready for development?
Yeah.
What's the highest and best use of the land you've identified as excess?
I didn't do a study on that.
Thank you, those are my questions.
Thank you. Mr. Betker, are you gonna ask any questions?
Just
right
on the
now?
building itself.
Okay.
It's done on the cost approach,
Yes.
and the department uses Marshall Swift.
Yes.
So the depreciation that's there is based on the age life of the building?
Yes.
That's all.
Thank you. Leo, any questions of the assessor?
Yeah, just looking at, I guess, Mr. Newfield's picture on page 2 seems to be the best. Would it not seem likely that the most likely development on that rear land would be perhaps putting another wing in the personal care wing?
Could be expansion, yeah, if they were approved to do it.
And then, I guess Mr. Becker asked my question about what method you used on the,
Yeah. Marshall.
okay, no more questions.
Thank you. Lynn, any questions?
I do have a question. It's about the land assessment piece. You mentioned that a portion of it was not assessed of the land area. I calculated about 58,000 square feet not assessed. Using the map, again, look at page 2 of the Mr. Newfield's presentation. What area, where is that not assessed portion of land? Is it the part behind that building?
Yeah.
Number 2?
Because it's close to the river.
So all the
The
part that
rebuilding
we're
is-
talking about, potential development,
Basically the building back, yeah.
so none of that is even assessed at all?
Yeah, and we haven't included that in our calculations.
Thank you. I just want to clarify that. Thank you.
Thanks, Lynn. Yeah, that's my question too. So we've got about 58,000 square feet, and we're talking about excess land. So where is the excess land? Is there any assignment of value to the excess land?
No, we haven't assessed it.
So you haven't assessed it at all, the 58,000 square feet at the rear?
No.
Okay.
But can I ask a follow-up then?
Yeah, so,
It's probably where you're going.
well, we'll leave it for Mr. Newfeld, I guess, but,
Sorry, I'm confused here.
well, so the conversation that you just had about questioning the assessor, you're asking about the excess land, and he's saying it's not assessed. They
It is
assigned them.
assessed.
No,
Well,
correct.
58,000 exempt, they removed.
Yeah,
I mean,
but
removed.
it's class school exempt, the first 2 acres.
But he's
And
not,
then- And then there's 5 acres here, so you have 3 acres that are being taxed as other.
but he's saying 58,000 square feet or 2 acres is not being assessed at all, never mind exempt. It's
The
not.
actual land area is 282,373.
Right.
And you're assessing 224,000.
Yes,
So the rest is, you're assigning no value to it at all.
that's correct.
Well, what is the what's the 2,293 taxable? What does that consist of?
The 200, we've assessed 224,000. The actual is 282,373.
No, but you have in your assessment, institutional property taxable, 2,293,000. What is that?
Oh, that's the land in and above the .81 school exempt.
Right. So, but that's land on the subject property.
Yeah,
That's land underneath the building structure?
yeah, oh yeah, all included.
It's part of the usable land, right?
Yeah, it's usable.
The 58,000 you're talking about, that's right on the river where it's not.
Yeah, we're not assigning.
That's because
that.
it can't be developed.
Okay, so you're,
Yeah.
okay, so to clarify, my questions are still pertinent, but I just wanna make sure we all understand that you've got 2 acres as school exempt, and the remaining, which is 86,000 square feet, and the balance is being taxed at class 60,
Yes.
regardless of where it lies.
No, we've, based on the 224,000, which is the property line, just envision being backed off.
Right, from the river.
Yes.
Right. So, I just want to, like, I know what you're talking about, and I'm worried that there's going to be any confusion. I'm not accusing you of saying anything, but the total land area is 224,000 that you're assessing.
The assessment, yes.
And of the 224,000, 2 acres, which is going to be 87,000 square feet, is included in the taxable school exempt.
Yes.
And the remaining land, which is 138,000 square feet, is being taxed at class 60 other. Or, well, class 60 institutional.
Taxable, yeah. Outside of the small chapel area, which we totally exempt.
So this 138,000 square feet is being assessed at 2,292,000.
Yes.
And so what's that rate per square foot then, or per acre?
Please use 1717 a square foot on page
17?
on page 15.
Yeah. This
Pardon
is
me,
ju-
12.
just for my sake, I appear to be confused, but I have 136,880 square feet, then assessed at 2293. $1,675. One, 133, oh, I see, because you also have land for the church. I got it now, okay, thank you.
Okay. Okay.
Okay.
Lynn, do you have anything else?
No, that was it. I
Okay.
just wanted to clarify, we
Yes.
have the taxable portion of land, we have the excess land that's also subject to taxation, and then we have the portion that's not assessed at all. Right.
Yes.
Okay.
Perfect. Okay, and I have no other questions. Mr. Neufeld, when you're ready, please.
Thank you. We have a couple of points to make, and then on this, and then Mr. Becker can discuss the building. And firstly, the WHA now has a pretty standard concept of construction cost on these homes. I don't know if Mr. Becker was aware of it, but it is well below what the assessor has for cost new. Now, I think the likely confusion is that people think that the accessories that are associated with the running of a personal care home often get included in the costs. So I can provide those numbers later if Mr. Becker wants, but the percent is wrong. It's too high. But our greater concern here is that the concept of a personal care home is based on funding, finite funding, and the number is approximately $71,000 per year per bed. Some of that can come from the family, and I believe the maximum is somewhere around $32,000, and the remainder, whatever it is, whether it's all of it or $40,000, is paid by the provincial government through health services. And the funding rate is set, and the expense rate is set in terms of, there are 7 hours per day of nurse service, a medical care, it's a very standardized amount. So what we have is, every personal care home, whether they're privately owned or owned by WHA, are getting the same funding. Our issue for years is, if we have the same funding, why aren't we doing this on an income-based approach? Because that would give us appropriate equity. And I don't mean equity in terms of comparing one assessment to another, but you have the same revenue stream, so we should be looking at a fairness in the system. You know, there are some PCHs that are assessed at $14,000 per bed, and there are some that are assessed at $165,000 per bed. And I'm not expecting the boards today to deal with it, because I think you may all be aware that these matters, we have 5 years under appeal at the municipal board. We have case management coming up in March. We are in discussions with the assessment department to find a more fair and equitable method. On my presentation, this is great. We have page numbers. It's right after page 36. No, we didn't get that handout. I'm just looking to see if I can show you. We basically have identified 7 properties that are excessive and exceed $65,000 per bed, and we're looking to have some form of equity. The math we have done indicates that a range of values is going to be anywhere from $30,000 to $65,000 per bed, and that's going to depend on factors related to occupancy. There are still many personal care units that are twin or triple occupancy. The new model is single occupancy, 1 bathroom per room, which is what this property, to my understanding, has. Now, that's our position on it, and I think we're rather all understand where this is going with it. But what we can deal with today, and we can deal with the issues Mr. Becker has brought up, but the land concept, this is rebuttal information, and it's just kind of explains what the issue is. The land is underneath and around a personal care home. It does not possess a different highest and best use than the property. That's issue number 1. So you can't assess it and say, well, I got the apartment sales down the road, that's what it must be worth. Its highest and best use has been decided already, because there's a personal care use on top of it and all around. And the thing I circled is from the Appraisal Institute, and for the purpose of this today, we're going to label this as surplus land. Surplus to the legislation, not the use. Now, in this case, they say surplus land is not needed to support the existing improvement. Well, it is in this case, but that doesn't change the concept. It cannot be separated from the property sold off. It does not have an independent highest and best use and may contribute a minimal value. Which means that the valuation has to be set on its institutional use, not whether it's used for an apartment. There are numerous setbacks and zoning restrictions to be considered as well. Now, regardless of land valuation, it doesn't matter how you arrive at your concept of it. If you're going to put a number on a value and you're going to look at other sales and you're going to apply it to the subject, you have to consider the setbacks. Now, the city has acknowledged there's a river setback, which is good. But there's also a zoning restriction, a specific boundary restriction. It's called abutting R1 land. And that limits what you can do on the subject lands. There's also the fact that a PCH is not an unrestricted permitted use. It is subject to conditions, probably conditional uses and variance, which is neighborhood approval, which is, if anyone's ever been to these meetings, they're a lot of fun. But if the neighbors object, it's a major issue. The one we all know about is the Bruce Oak Center. And that was a different style of usage, but the opposition to that was immense. Now, it's likely going to go ahead after a lot of cost to propel it through the system. The PCHs would have to anticipate similar issues. It's always first come, first served. If you're in the ground first, your rights are set. The minute the houses go in beside it, they have their rights established. So this has to be considered in your cost. And just merely comparing it to land that's had their impact fees paid and their service fees paid and saying it's the same number, it's not the same number. It has a restricted highest and best use, which is the subject itself. Now, we have a couple of sales, which are interesting in that what they show is raw land on page 2, raw land prior to development, before these service fees are paid. So if you were looking at it on the basis of, well, if we could carve it off and sell it, that's the number you gotta look at, $87,000 an acre. There's two really good sales here. 2689 McPhillips, which became part of Precinct F, and there's one in Inkster, which was an industrial development, which abutted a retention pond. And retention ponds are great for residents who want to view. They're awful for institutional uses and industrial uses, because it just takes away from usable land. Do you have a second handout or not? Or was there just this particular brief?
There's something stapled to it.
Ah, yes, okay, all right. What these are similar style of uses. There's hospitals in here, there's institutional facilities. I'm just trying to remember what these are off the top of my head. 2665 Ness is a school. School exemption is 10 acres. So 10.2 acres assessed at 1.4 million, or a touch over 140 an acre. 360 Rouge Road, another school, 0.2 acres, $29,000. Extrapolate that, that's 145,000 an acre. Nathaniel, 8 acres, 9.1 acres at 1.9 million, a little over 200,000 an acre. 409 Cache is a E&I, this is a hospital. They have 10 acres, so they have 8.4 that's taxable at a 1,649,000, so a little under 200,000 an acre. I know I'm arguing equity, yes and no. Next is 2300 McPhillips, that's 7 Oaks, 12 acres assessed at 1.7 million, which is about 150 an acre. 2340 Pembina, and this is 3 lots. This is Victoria Hospital, so they have a total of 14.3 acres, and so they've got about 4 acres that are taxable, which is at a total of 837,000, so 200,000 an acre. Pembina Highway, frontage. 1095 Concordia Hospital, 2 acres, 134,000 per acre. And where the reason that these are so relevant is that all of this land on these sites I've shown you form part of the operating unit. The hospitals need the land for parking, they're only exempt to 10 acres. This site has a large PCH, they're using the land, and they've exceeded their exemption of 2 acres. In these cases below, not a single one of them exceeded $200,000 per acre, which is approximately, sorry, I forgot how much that was per foot. Four something per square foot, thank you. And now we have a request for $17 a square foot for land that doesn't have frontage, whatever it is, the excess land, it's overdeveloped, it's not going anywhere, it's under a care home. So that's our contention on the excess land issue. Thank you.
Okay, so on page 6, you've got a summary of what you're asking for, and the difference between you and the assessor is $443,000 in total.
No, we're asking for an assessment of $272,000 on the taxable institutional versus $2,293,000.
Okay,
Now, we're looking for $87,777 on 3.1 acres, that's the first page. First page, right before the bottom box, top line.
sorry, wrong one. Okay. All right.
And to be clear, we're fine with anything up to and including $200,000 an acre as the equity indicates. But that's what's happening in the rest of the world. Thank you.
Thank you. Would you like to question Mr. Neufeld first?
Okay. Page 37, these are assessment comparisons.
Yes, they are.
Does the board typically consider those in terms of coming up with a value?
Well, I'm allowed to ask them to consider it, because in this case, we have a very interesting equity argument where you have an entire universe of hospitals and schools that have a rate that is dramatically lower than the subject. So something is wrong in the preparation of this assessment, and there are several other personal care homes that are affected by it. They're all educational, institutional uses, specialized uses.
But none of these are, the ones that you're comparing, are any of these, they're hospitals and schools, there's no personal care homes in this chart?
In these, no, but there are more examples. One, Morley, which is Riverview, you're gonna hear later today, was originally assessed at $1 million an acre, and the assessor cut it to a touch over $100,000 an acre, and Morley is palliative care and personal care homes. And I think there's a few others in here. I think Deer Lodge is, I don't know if Deer Lodge is here today or not, but Deer Lodge is assessed on Portage Avenue around $100,000 an acre.
So you got some sales here of land, pages 3 and 4. You mentioned there's no services, there's no sewer and water on
That's
these
correct.
ones at all? Is there sewer and
Oh,
water?
sorry, the Inkspert one has a services page.
Is there sewer and water attached to the subject property now?
To the large lot, yes.
Okay. You mentioned some abutting R1 land regulations. Is there anything in your package here you can look at?
No, that arose out of questioning of you that I mentioned that there is a special boundary consideration. I asked you if you're aware of it. And what it is, if you are in RMF land and you abut an R1, that consideration for any development has to be consistent with the R1. And that's a restriction placed on it.
Okay. Do you think this would be a good spot for an apartment on the river?
If it were vacant, sure. It's not. So the answer is no.
See, you're requesting here, it says 65,000 per bed. And then you've taken, well, first of all, is that like a mandated by the government number? Like, I'm just
The
not sure
government,
that number came from.
the government mandated number is approximately $71,000 in support for personal care homes. And the current government has slightly amended the funding formula, not to a degree that this would make this change much, but every personal care home gets that level of funding. And a longer study that I prepared and submitted 3 years ago went through the financial analysis of it and calculated what the allocation was for capital costs in the funding, because we'd had a difference between funding and costs. The remainder can go to capital. Capital establishes the value per bed. we would take that differential and capitalize into value, and the analysis came back roughly around $54,000. And it'll vary depending on, as I mentioned, the single versus double versus triple occupancy. The assessment department has this document from a while back, and I'm not resigned to this, but I have a hunch that this board isn't going to make a ruling on this today, and we're going to continue on to case management and municipal board, and I would certainly love them to do it, but I didn't think we were gonna waste everybody's time today, because we would have to argue it with everyone on the appeal. See, I'm not a defeatist, I'm a realist.
So 71, there's other sources of income, right? Like people pay to go into these places?
No, if they pay to go in, it gets subtracted from the overall contribution the government makes.
Okay.
And that's about 32,000 is the max, I think.
You applied some depreciation figures to your cost per bed, 50% for single and 65% for double. Can you tell us where that came from?
Sorry. This was a further calculation on the cost approach. Now, our source information, which I mentioned earlier, is the WRHA. And right now, they're building all the homes, or taking them over on the market. There were a few transacted, but the last two transactions of personal care homes were foreclosures where the WRHA had to take control of them. Now, their costing model today is $130,000 per bed, and that's real estate. Now, they do put additional costs in there in terms of the equipment, infrastructure to do a PCH, and the number goes somewhere up closer to $200,000 per bed on other equipment costs and other non-taxable items. But it's $130 per bed, and that means the original cost new on the WHA model. And by the way, this one is the WHA model. It's the new style with the wings. They're building this virtually everywhere. You'll see pictures of it later. They use the same architect. Saves them some money. Finally figured that one out. But we would just applied some depreciation on it, and I didn't want to stray into Mr. Becker's territory, and he can deal with it, but we were looking at, because this is a specialized use, that there's a massive one-time depreciation when you build it, because what are you going to sell it for? You build your PCH, and next year you decide to sell it. There's no market. The market is the WHA. You go bankrupt, or you close it down and try to convert it to something else. Can't convert it to apartments because the units are too small. And who wants a bachelor apartment on River Road? That's not the right market. So we had looked at, there was an old case law in here on the Gulf Dome, which I had included. And I was at that hearing, and the decision was an instant, Mr. Michael Mercury kept calling it instant depreciation. But it's 50%. The minute you build a specialized product that can't be resold. So we came up with, on the cost approach, a value of $7,475,000. And I'm really deferring to Mr. Becker if he has something else he'd like to say in that, because he was looking at this, but this was my analysis. If we're stuck with cost approach, that's what we should use, which incidentally works out to actually not 65 a bed, because they missed the dementia care. We actually have 154 beds. So it's actually 50,000 a bed, which is right in our range, our income-based range. Last thing I should probably note is that dementia beds are also the subject of our appeal to municipal board on class, because the dementia bed has a greater amount of care hours devoted to it, and it comes under insured hospital services. So it may be hospital exempt or exempt in a different category. So this is one of, I think, 3 units that does dementia care. And when we did Concordia Hospital, they have the same setup where they have dementia and PCH. Their dementia beds were 100% exempt as hospital.
So, just touching back, you got the 50% and 65%, based on your dealings at the municipal board?
It was-
With the golf dome?
Yeah, it was a concept of immediate depreciation on an asset that isn't saleable with a specialized use.
Do you think that the golf dome, its building is similar to the subject property?
Absolutely not. But it's a recreational facility made of fabric, but it's a specialized facility that will not be sold on its real estate value. Neither will this. And the concept, if you read the order, has nothing to do with it being a golf dome or a PCH. It has to do with the concept of immediate depreciation after building. It's sort of like the idea that you walk into a car dealership and you buy a new car, and an hour later you return it and they say, well, it's worth 20% less because it's used now. It's not relevant how many kilometers you put on it, it's just the concept of new to used and what is the market willing to pay.
Those are my questions, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Baracus, pardon me. Mr. Hardy, any questions of the appellant?
I guess the question is, you provided a lot of comparison of assessments. Now, the case law very much is that we can't consider comparison of assessments to provide market value.
I would agree with that on the concept of assigning a number, but not on assigning a theory. And that's what I'm speaking to. I'm talking about a theory. And that theory is that this is the land that's underneath an educational and institutional operation and forms part of the highest and best use, which has to be married to any concept of excess land. It's the same thing. So in these cases, the city acknowledged that, and there's no reason for them not to acknowledge the same theory. I'm just showing you that I'm not inventing a new theory, I'm saying they missed this one. And you'll see it, there's a few others today that I'll point out to you in the PCH category, and without belaboring the point.
Okay. I guess the best guide would be some vacant land that's sold prior to the reference year for use as a institutional property. Do you have any sales like that?
Well, yes and no. The problem with that is, I think, I'm just gonna check the docket here. Do you have it? Okay, it's not on here. We have a property that I'm aware of on St. Anne's, on the river that was sold, and I've forgotten the number. But when the WHA purchased it, they were competing against apartment developers. So they had to pay what the market was willing to for their property. But the minute they put a PCH on it, they changed the property. It's the concept of highest and best use. Once you remember earlier the assessor asked me a question, is this a good place for apartments? And I said, yes, if vacant, no, as soon as we put the PCH on it. So in appraisal, we have that differentiation. Highest and best use as vacant, highest and best use as developed. Now, the highest and best use as vacant apartments, don't disagree, maybe 400,000 or 500,000 an acre. But once you put the PCH on it, then you have to say, would I have a different highest and best use, which would involve bulldozing the PCH for one and redeveloping it, and that physically, But then we get into a totally different category on highest and best use, is we have what's called the highest and best use of properties that are benefiting the community. And at that point, we've turned the corner and we have a completely different concept under work. So, for example, the Assiniboine Park and the zoo and all the land, the forest. It's worth far more than if it weren't forest and land, but it forms an amenity to the city that makes everything around it worth more. And therefore, that's the value is based on its contribution. Any hospital, the same thing. Airport land, the same thing. In our training, the funniest thing ever, and this, maybe anybody knows this game, Sin City. It actually was part of a curriculum in getting my appraisal designation. We had to play Sin City. And what we would do is we would put commercial developments, residential, industrial, and then we would have, then if you have a church or a school or a park, and you'd put them in the middle of these properties, and the properties around increased in value. And that's what a community betterment, a library is worthless, except towards the community. It makes all the houses around it worth more because we have a library. And it's the same concept with the PCH. So I know I'm getting on my soapbox and giving you long-winded answers, but the minute a PCH was put on it, the highest and best use of land is vacant, it was no longer a concept that we could accept. Now we have to look at the highest and best use as improved with the community betterment on it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Lynn, any questions?
I have no questions.
Okay, for the record, Mr. Neufeld, what class code and what breakdown would you break down at $7,475,000?
That would be, I think 40S is the 7475. And then 40E, we're not contesting at 190. And 40S, 40S was the 7475. 40T would be 272,000.
Okay, so your total would be in value?
I'm such a, sorry, I think most of you know where I've been the last couple of weeks. I'm not, obviously not making nice reports for you. $7,937,000.
Okay, just to confirm, the $7,475,000 is 40S.
Yes.
40E is 190,000, same as the city, and 40T is 272,000.
That's correct.
Okay. For a total of $7,937,000. Okay. Any requirement for summary? Oh, no, sorry, yeah, we're still dealing with Mr. Bedker, I'm sorry.
Forgot about it.
No, I didn't forget, but.
Do you need?
No.
Just how to deal with this.
Okay. Now, my approach is a little bit different than Mr. Neufeld's, and I gotta admit his is, not very credible, but I'm gonna go with my approach the way I brought it in. So if I could ask the board to turn to my brief. I won't go over everything that's already gone over, but if I could turn to page 5. And I've done it the same way as the assessment department. The assessors used a cost approach based on their breakdown that we estimate the 2020 assessment, broken down in land at $17.17 a square foot. And the building's replacement cost, new less depreciation at $10,814,000 for a total of $14,661,000. Due to the fact that the subject property is non-profit, 2 acres of land plus the building are exempt from school tax, the balance of the land is taxable. We do not have sufficient records of the construction of improvements and are unable to do a valid cost approach on the building as of the date of the submission. Now, since I've gotten the assessor's brief, I've been able to work on the cost approach, and I'd like to put that in my rebuttal. So if I could ask the board to go over it all at the same time, I would appreciate it.
Okay.
Okay, so I'll have that out. But first I'll deal with the way I approach the land. For the land, the assessor has used an April 1, 2018 market value of $17.17 per square foot based on 224,000 square feet. We were unable to find vacant land sales along the river for the size of the subject, but have the following comparable sales. The first one's on Beaver Hill, and I can ask the board, I'll just kind of bounce back and forth. Page 9, I start showing the site plans. So the first one on Beaver Hill is 182,092 square feet, sold in December 16 for $15.38 a square foot. And the picture of that is at the top of page 9. The next one, number 2, that's actually off Kel Gardner Drive and Larry Vicker Drive. That one is in North Bologna, it's still vacant land. Third comparison is in Sage Creek. I don't have any update on the information though. Since the property sold, it's been redeveloped and the roll numbers have changed. So I don't have a site plan for you on that one, so just going based on the sales data. The next one is 233,986 square feet. That's on Bridge Lake Drive and also has frontage on Keniston and Bison. That one would be at the top of page 10. That's in, I guess, the Bridgewater development. The next one is at 400 Pipeline. That's 261,000 square feet. That's sold in October 2017 for $10.72. That's at the bottom of page 10. There's shows the site plan there. So that's lots of frontage on Pipeline. And then the last one, that one is the fifth one. That one is on Pipeline Road and Amber Trails development, and the site is still vacant. If you turn to page 11, it shows where that site is. So on page 6, all of the above comparisons have symbols to the subject, and the average sale price per square foot is $12.72 per square foot. Since none of these sales have riverfront access, we are using a sale price per square foot of $15.19. I've added a 25% premium. I don't have any backup info to give you that. It's just, I know river lots will sell for more. This one here I've given a 25% premium, so I've used $15.19. And then I've shown you the breakdown there of what I have for the land value. So the taxable portion would actually go from $2,293,000 to $2,028,000, and then I carried it through on the other properties. Now, if I could ask the board to turn to my rebuttal evidence. I did this building for 2018 as well, and after page 3, you'll see this is the assessor's presentation for the 2018 assessment appeal. Now, as Matthew said, it's all done on the Marshall Swift cost approach. So if you turn to page 9 of that brief, you'll see that the RCN, now this is all based on April 1 of 2016. So I've highlighted there, the RCN is $14,000,004 for the original building, and then $4,342,000 for the addition. And the overall depreciation on the first, the older portion was 58%, and on the newer portion it was 10%. If I could ask you to turn to the board to the assessor's brief for 2020, and if you turn to page 8, you'll see it's the very same, and the RCN has gone up from, on building 1, from $14,414,000 to $15,571,000, and for building 2 from $4,342,000 to $4,699,000. The reason the RCN has gone up because it's now based on an April 1, 2018 value as opposed to the April 1, 2016. But you'll notice that the depreciation is the same. Now, when you're doing the Marshall Swift, it asks you to put in the effective age of the building. So if the building was built in 2000, if the reference year is April 18, you would have 18 years effective age. So if you then turn to the page after page 9 in my rebuttal, I've done a Marshall Swift. Now, I don't have all the building particulars that are needed to do a complete Marshall Swift on it. You have to know the foundation, the type of wall, the height, and everything that goes into it. But I just took the standard building, called it masonry basing, bearing walls with warm and cooled air. And you'll notice, the first one I have there, this is based on an April 2016 value. That's about in the middle there, I've got it highlighted, cost as of April, and it gives me 10%, which is exactly the same as what the assessor used for 2018. You go to the next page, and I've redone it again. Now I've used the newer portion to do this because it's clean, it's 2007, it's one story, it's an easy just model to put into Marshall Swift, and I come up with 11% as opposed to, I'm sorry, at the bar, 13% as opposed to the 10%. So I think something in the cost approach, the effective age maybe wasn't changed between the reference dates, and for some reason it's not spitting out the correct depreciation. So my conclusions are page 2 of my rebuttal. So if you were to use the revised cost approach using the correct depreciation, in my opinion, the correct depreciation, and using the land value that I've come up with using the $15.19 a square foot, I'm suggesting an overall value of $13,566,000, and I've broken it down under exempt, taxable, and school exempt. And I'm open for questions.
Thanks, Mr. Becker. Mr. Baracus, any questions of the appellant?
Yeah. Where am I? So we agree that the cost approach is the appropriate approach for valuing personal care homes?
Yes, I can actually admit that I did use a tactic similar to Mr. Neufeld's at the municipal board on, it was an old one at the corner of Magnus on the Red River, Sharon Home it was called. And I fought equity based on the fact that they're all done by the same cost approach. So if they're all done by the same method, the only difference in the method, the assessment should be the age of the building, the size, or the value of the land underneath it. So I've used the cost approach, and I used Marshall Swift.
Okay. Okay. And then just on your rebuttal, it looks like we have different depreciations on this, and it would stand to reason that given it's 2 years older, that it would have
Higher depreciation.
higher depreciation on it, so, I'm not sure why we're kicking out the same depreciation in our model as, the previous cycle, but, I have no reason to, not trust that it's 13% for, 2018.
And I think what you'll find too is that the next one that we're doing, Calvary Temple, which is a newer building, was built in 2000, because it's just one building, 3-story, it actually has a higher depreciation than the 3%. Like, in my real opinion, the 1988 building should have 4% higher as opposed to the newer building, but because I didn't do a cost on them, the original building is 1 and 2, 3-story portions.
Mhm. So
So unless you have all the data of the square footage, which are 1-story, what are 3-story, it's hard to do it. That's why I just used the 2007.
Yeah, okay. And then your sales here, just your sales of land. And you say like, these land sales are good for determining the land value for the subject property?
That's the.
Outside
approach
the
I-
river, yeah.
Yeah, that's the approach I took, yes.
Those are my questions, thank you.
Thank you. Neil, any questions of the appellant?
Okay, so just to confirm, you did this quasi cost approach just to determine what the difference in
depreciation.
depreciating, and then you went and used the city's RCNs?
No, yes, I used the RCN.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you, I understand.
Thank you. Lynn, any questions?
No questions.
Okay, Mr. Betker, just to confirm, page 6 of your original is, don't consider that because it's different
Correct.
evaluation?
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, I'd actually.
Except maybe the land portion, I guess.
Yeah, the land, I just carried it over to page 2 of my rebuttal.
Okay, so your new rebuttal is, value is 13,566,000,
Yes,
broken down to 176,000
exempt.
exempt, 2,028,000 taxable, and school exempt amount, 11,362,000. And just for the record, we're dealing with file number 194625 as your presentation.
Yes.
Yeah, that's, next time we're gonna split it up completely, okay. And just for the record, when Mr. Neufeld presented, it was file number 19-4446.
Oh, right.
Separate deals.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, any requirement or summary, Mr. Brochus?
I believe cost approach is the best approach. That's the way all the personal care homes in the city have been valued, whether they've been appealed or not. Mr. Becker and I agree on the methodology.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Betker?
No,
Okay,
thank you.
okay, that concludes 450 River Road, file number 19-44625. Okay, so we're gonna start with you, Mr. Betker. Oh, yeah, okay, we'll take a 7-minute break till 25 after.
All right.
Okay, I'll call the hearing back to order, and we're dealing with 1325 Aaron Street, and we're gonna deal with file number 19-4850. It's a 2020 realty assessment. Mr. Neufeld is representing the owner here, so let's deal with that file number first, Mr. Baracus, please.
Okay.
If it's possible to waive reading and just, is that fine?
Okay.
And then we can do the reading for Mr. Becker. And then I can just enter my submission as evidence. And then you can proceed to
Okay,
Mr. Becker.
okay, so just present the file number and the roll number for the
Okay.
record, please.
File number 19-4850, roll number 13011433800,
Okay,
1325 Aaron Street.
okay. And Mr. Neufeld?
No questions, entering my evidence, and we've discussed all these matters in the past.
Okay, so you're presenting the value per bed, appreciated.
And
Okay.
same questions as before, asked and answered, and I have no questions of the assessor.
Okay, all right. Thanks, Mr. Neufeld. Okay. Mr. Baracus, when you are ready, please.
Okay. Okay, so roll number 13011433800, 325 Aaron Street. We got another personal care home we're talking about. Assessed value 10,900,000. It's institutional. We've got a small exempt section. They've got a place of worship in there, so as per section 23(1 of the Municipal Assessment Act, that's fully tax exempt. And then we've got the 10,786,000, which is school tax exempt, based on it being a personal care home. Municipal Assessment Act 23(1). Did you find that on page 9? That's personal care home. You'll see that was the bullet that I didn't, for whatever reason, wasn't included in my last brief. So it's school tax exempt up to 0.81 hectares. Place of worship is fully exempt. Pardon me. So, same methodology, cost, unique properties don't, there's a limited market for them, so so we use the cost approach on these ones. Page 2A shows pictures of it. It's on Aaron Street, located between Clifton and I believe Wall Street. Across the street from it are single-family dwellings, and to the south of it, on the corner of Sargent and Aaron, there's an apartment, Battle Housing Co-op. On page 2C, the zoning, RMFS, intended to accommodate development of multifamily apartments and condominiums, neighborhoods with medium to high residential densities. So you'll see across the street there, in yellow, those are the single-family dwellings, so. That gives somewhat the character of the neighborhood. On the other side of it, to the east, there are other non-residential uses in place, but we are zoned RMFS. Keeping in character with the property to the south of it. Use cost, page 3 is our building summary. It was taken from our model, which is Marshall and Swift. Land sale comparables. So they range from 23 to 28. Pictures follow. See that the pictures, a few like pictures of comparables 1, 2, and 4 indicate shapes of properties that would be more inclined for residential development, single family. Comparable 3 though on Lee Boulevard, it's more of a property shaped in the manner in which is similar to the subject property. So that one, $23.07 per square foot on the sale price, which occurred way back in 2015. So we are using 24 on page 7 on a net rate per square foot on the property, pardon me. So we're right there with it. It's already shown that, given the apartment to the south of the subject property, that there isn't anything stopping multifamily there currently, and we're so close to comparable 3 in terms of sale price per square foot. I didn't make an adjustment to the net rent per square foot. Everything else is just done by the model, and their area is within the 0.81 hectares, so they get a full school tax exemption. A small area, again, is just the place of worship, 100% tax exempt. Going to page 12, you'll see the 2018 was heard and presented. Confirmation was asked for, it looks like, $9,630,000, and then page 17, that assessment was confirmed on this one too, at $9,899,000. On this one, we're at $10,900,000, so we're very similar cost methodology carrying on throughout. That's my understanding.
Thank you, Mr. Barkis. Okay, so Mr. Neufeld says he has no questions. Submitted his briefs. So, Neil, any questions of the assessor?
I guess just in terms of the land value, the comparables you're given are in residential areas. I guess except for, which one was? Oh, the one on Lee Boardroom, was it?
Yeah, there's one on Lee where the shape is much more similar to the subject.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm clicking away on.
It's still, it seems to be adjacent to a residential area.
Yeah,
Now Erin is kind of a unique street, older, kind of mixed industrial and residential. Would that affect the value for that land?
well, I mean, for that location, you know, given the zoning, it's, and the property just to the south of it, I actually had this one under appeal. The one to the south of it, there's bus route, going down Sargent, I believe. There is, restaurants and amenities. So, I would think that for a multifamily, development, being, closer to, services, would be a good thing. And there's houses, not for nothing, just across the street. So it does have some residential character, but I agree, it's more of a mixed use.
Okay, thank you, that's my question.
Thank you, Neil. Lynn, any questions?
I have no questions.
Okay, and neither do I, so that concludes file number 194850, 1325 Aaron Street. So, next property on the docket. We got one here.
Marion?
No, Doug, we're doing a separate appeal, okay? It's a different file number.
No, we did.
So-
Oh, but it's the same property.
It's the
Yeah,
Yeah.
same property, different file number.
Okay.
So we're gonna start it off as a new hearing here. And for this property, so now we're dealing with file number 19-3863, same property, 1325 Aaron Street, different appeal by Mr. Betker. So we're dealing with the 2020 realty assessment. So Mr. Barakas, for the record, could you enter or just review the roll number and everything? And then I think probably Mr. Betker,
Yeah.
listen to the presentation.
Yeah, I'd just like to ask.
Okay, so,
Okay.
thank you.
Roll number 13-0114-33800, 1325 Aaron. The evidence I provided for the previous file on the same property in reference here rolls into this.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Okay, Mr. Betker, any questions on the assessor's evidence presented?
Yes. Could you please turn to page 2A? At the top of 2A, you show the site plan of the subject property.
Aerial photograph, yeah.
And it backs onto a main rail line, onto a rail line then?
I believe we have a rail influence on it. Yeah, there's a train track behind it.
Okay, so none of your comparisons have a train track,
That's correct.
none of your comparisons have industrial behind them?
No.
Okay, page number 4. So that's your first sale on Bridgeport Path, that was all developed as townhouses.
Yeah.
And number 2, on Singh, that was all townhouses.
Yeah.
And comparison number 3, that one sold, according to your records here, that sold in 2015 for $1,500,000 or $23 a square foot.
Yes.
Are you aware that it's currently assessed with an April 18 value of $1,166,000 or $17.93 a square foot?
No, I'm not.
Okay. I have a copy of it if you need it, but I'm under oath, so.
Yeah.
All right, and again, you're done it on Marshall Swift?
Yes.
Okay, would you say that your comparables are better suited for residential value, development than the subject property?
Comparables, like I mentioned in my presentation, 1, 2, and 3, given their shape, it's more conducive to a townhouse type development. Comparable 3 provides more opportunity, I would say, given its shape.
Okay, all right, that's all the questions I have.
Thank you. Lynn, any questions of the assessor?
I have no questions.
Thank you. Neil, any questions?
None that I have not already.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Mr. Betker, 1325 Aaron Street.
This is gonna be similar to my last presentation, where if I could ask the board, if I could hand out rebuttal and go over it, because it's to do with the cost of approaching him. And I guess if I could start on page 5 of my brief,
Your main brief?
of my main brief, yes. This is to do with the land sales. Now, I've looked at several different land sales with similar sizes to the subject property, and my sales range from January of 2016 to September of 2017. I'm gonna have to ask the board if we can bounce around again so I can show you the site plans of the numbers as I go through. The first one at 690 Hugo, that's 83,582 square feet, sold for $15.73 in January of 16, and that is at the top of page 11. You can see that it was developed as condominiums. The second comparison is on El Tassi Drive in North Kildonan, that's at the bottom of page 11, that is still vacant residential land. And that one sold for $14.21. The next one on Eaglewood is 85,887 square feet, that sold in May of 2017 for $15.14 a square foot. This is on the corner of Waverly, which is the site plan at the top of page 13. And, it's Eaglewood Drive, I'm sorry, Eaglewood Drive, that's on page 12, sorry, at the top of page 12. And that's in that new development, Bridgewater. It's Eaglewood's close to Waverly. The fourth comparison is on Waterford Green at number 90, sold in June of 17 for $15.75 a square foot. And that is located at the site plan at the bottom of page 12. Again, it's in a residential area. The next one is on Highwater. That's at the top, the site plan is at the top of page 13. That was a similar size to the subject property. Sold in June of 17 for $12.80 a square foot. And the next one, the last one is on London. That's 83,689 square feet. That sold in September of 17 for $11.05 a square foot. I got all of the comparisons similar, are located, are similar zoning to the subject and have average sale prices is $14.33 per square foot. Majority of the properties are located in newer developments. Based on the comparables, we're using a rate of $14 a square foot. I've shown the breakdown there for the exempt portion. I'm using 15,000 as part of the exempts, and for the school tax, I'm using 1,105,000. Now, if I could ask the board to turn to rebuttal evidence. Now, the fourth page in. Now, I didn't appeal this for 2018, so I don't have the assessor's original costing for 2018. But I did run a Marshall Swift on it, just as a basic using the overall square footage. And the first one, it shows as of April 2016, the depreciation is 22%, which is the same as what the assessor has used for the subject property for 2020. You go to the next page, the last page, and it's based on April of 2018, and the depreciation is 26%. So I think the model has come up with, it's corrected their Marshall Swift has corrected the RCN, but not the depreciation. So on page 2, I've applied 26% depreciation to their RCN. And then I follow through below, and you can see that my total assessment goes down to $9,557,000. And adding the land value based on $14 a square foot, I come up with an overall value of $9,557,000, which is broken down as $99,000 exempt and $9,458,000 school exempt. That's my presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Betker. Mr. Barakis, any questions of the appellant?
On the land, on page 5 of your brief, your original submission, you've got 6 sales. None of them have the same zoning as the subject property, correct?
Where's the subject? The subject has RMFS Res Multi. These are all RMFM. One is R1E, one is R2.
That's all my questions, thank you.
Thank you. Lynn, any questions of the appellant?
No questions.
Neil, any questions?
No questions.
Thank you. So Mr. Betker, for the record, you are asking us to revise the assessment to,
Overall to 9,557,000.
I'm looking at the wrong page here.
Page 2 of my rebuttal.
There you are. So you're asking for,
99,000 is exempt,
okay, 99,000 exempt, right,
and 9,458,000 is exempt.
9,458 as opposed to 10,786,000 dollars. And that's based on, reworking the, Marshall Swifts? Yeah.
And a $14 land rate.
Yeah, okay. Okay. Any requirement for summary? Mr. Backus?
No,
Are you
thank
good?
you.
Okay, Doug, you're done then. right? Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. All right.
We're losing our audience. Obviously, just haven't seen them.
Okay. Next property on the docket is Mr. Neufeld, 735 St. Anne's Road, file number 19-4447. Bear with me one second, Mr. Brockis, here. Let me get organized, okay. And we're dealing with the 2020 realty assessment. Okay, Mr. Brockis, when you're ready, please.
Okay. Roll number 0802 10625 00735 St. Anne's Road. It's another personal care home. 1 to 2 stories, built in 2007. Construction class C. So there's 2 lines here. We've got the school tax exempt section to it. So we have applied the maximum exemption as per the 0.81 hectares on it, and then the additional land over and above is taxable. So for this one, I noticed in our brief, there's a recommendation at the bottom to reduce it to 14,108,000. And that is based on, first of all, if you go to page 8, we'll look at the columns first. So we've got 3 columns ranging from $13 a square foot to $17 a square foot. Subject is zone C3 commercial corridor, so are the columns. If you jump ahead to page 11, you'll see that the modeled valuation, for whatever reason, under the school exempt, gave it $21, but for the taxable, it's $14.97. Looking at the comparables, $14.97 is more appropriate. So I reworked it on page 12, highlighted in yellow, just putting the $14.97 on the net rate per square foot, applying that to the school tax, and then recalculating the value based on that. So that was, so the revised number, total number is 14,108, and then if you want the breakdown per line, so what changes is the school tax exempt portion. It goes from 14,082,000 to 13,522,000, rounding down, to come up with 14,108.
And the other remains at 586.
Yes, because that was already generated at 14.97, so it would be wrong to
Yeah, okay.
use the rate per square foot.
Just wanted to confirm that.
Zone C3 commercial corridor, on page 4, you'll see the breakdown on it. Permitting to provide commercial goods and services to residents of the community for areas that are dependent on automobile access, exposed to heavy automobile traffic, but not including regional shopping malls and regional shopping areas. Frequent views by the public and visitors to Winnipeg. This provide an attractive appearance of landscaping, sufficient parking, and controlled traffic movement. We use the cost approach on this one, again, for what we talked about in the last property, so I won't belabor that. Page 7 is our cost and building section, taken from Marshall Smith in your system, and the land comparables. There is if you go to page 17, shows contract summary on this property for completion of work at $12,017,800. And if you go to page 18, you'll see that it says the total project value is $10,763,000. So we're at 14 million, and then you'll look at the land value on top of the cost to construct the property. Looks like we're in and around the price point. And then page 19, 20, 21, 22, they just show the old orders. I'm not gonna belabor it, but the decisions, they wrote the cost evaluation again for the past 2 years. That's my best, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Barakis. Mr. Neufeld, any questions of the assessor?
Yes, 1 second.
Take your time.
No, I don't need that much time. On page 1, you have a land area of 126,252. Now, is that the actual title area?
That's what we have, yes.
In the review of 450 River, which was also on the river, that was adjusted, correct?
Yes.
And this one is on the river, but you didn't make an adjustment for unusable land in this one. Any reason why?
I'm not sure why that wasn't adjusted in our model, no.
So do you recall how much the adjustment was for the loss of the river use land on, how many square feet was lost on 450 River? Is it appropriate to go back and ask that? I know it's been closed.
I think it was like 58,000 or something.
58,000 square feet,
I think so.
okay. So on river, 58,000 square feet deleted due to riverfront, and in this case, the land that exceeds the 2-acre amount is, sorry, I just had it here, 37, was it? 39,000 square feet.
Yes.
Okay, so, but in this case, no change was made. Any reason to believe that they wouldn't be affected by similar setbacks?
I mean, like looking at your brief on page 9, there's a date 1985, where you brought this up, showing the setbacks on it. It was built in, this property was built in 2007, so it would appear that they did not take this, they did not consider this.
Okay, so it was treated differently than 450 River, okay. On the cost approach, was this, what manual was used for this?
Marshall and Swift.
Okay. Did you look at their actual, I noticed that it's in your brief, they have a permit in their brief, did they not?
Yeah, they do.
And what's that declared construction value?
They declared it at $10,763,000.
Right, and that's for the entire project.
Yes, that's for constructing a personal care facility.
Right. So within that price, there would have been some consideration for non-accessible items, the equipment that they need in that facility, with particular finishing that's dedicated to the personal care use, lifts, overhead trolleyaways, whatever you want to call them, that sort of thing?
I don't have the details on this currently.
And that construction date was 2006?
Yeah, May 23rd, 2006.
Did you look at those numbers, compare them to the costing manual, make any consideration for time and then for non-realty components?
No.
And how many beds do you have in your records on this site?
I've got something from the website saying that it's an 80-bed facility.
Okay. In regard to depreciation, is this only physical depreciation that was calculated?
I believe so, yes.
And how was this calculated?
We've got Marshall and Swift in our system, and it gets punched in. I'm not super familiar with the
Okay.
cost, and then it generates the value.
So was it punched in as like a personal care home? So do you know what economic life they had in the beginning?
I'm sorry, could you say that again?
Do you know what the economic life of the property was?
No, I wasn't involved in putting this one on the roll. This predates my
Okay.
time.
Fair to say that the typical Marshall and Swift economic life will range on a building based on quality of construction. Cheap construction, 35 years, quality construction, 45 to 50 years. Have you seen anything different than that?
I know, like, that there's different qualities you can put in, and then they give out different economic life.
And what does Marshall and Swift use for a calculation of depreciation? Do they use a straight line style of depreciation?
I'm not sure.
Well, for example, this property is, how would you, it doesn't matter how you want to characterize it, 12 years old as of the reference date, 15 years old as of today, no, I can't do my math, 13 years old as of today, on 45, 50-year life. You're saying that Marshall and Swift was applying a depreciation rate of 7% or so?
Yes.
And if this property were 13 years old on a, we'll call it a 52-year life, because that's, math is simple, would that not indicate 25% depreciation? I picked those numbers because they would work
Yeah,
out.
yeah, that's what it would. We go by what Marshall and Swift tells us.
What does the IAAO say that you're supposed to use?
Oh, I don't know.
And now, so this is a physical depreciation. Have you made any consideration for economic obsolescence or functional obsolescence?
Not that I can see, no.
To your knowledge, is the site still functionally adequate in the marketplace for its, as it was built?
I haven't had the opportunity to inspect the place.
Now, on the economic front, economic obsolescence would deal with the ability to alter the place and fulfill other demands in the marketplace. Does this property have that ability?
Like converting it into something else?
Yes, alternate use. So if you open, for example, a big box warehouse store, you could have a Winners in it one day and a Dollarama in it the next day, and a restaurant concept after that, because you're dealing with a shell. So that's an example, but what are the alternate uses for this property?
I haven't inspected, I don't know the layout enough to answer that question.
To your knowledge, if it lacked alternate uses, should not a functional obsolescence or an economic obsolescence be considered?
As in, based on its current use, that it wouldn't be good to use as a nursing home? Like,
Yes, if
compared to other
If
personal care
more
homes?
people stop getting old and dying,
That'd be nice.
what else could you use this for?
Assisted living, potentially, kind of along those lines.
Its scope is limited to the healthcare field, it's fair to say.
Elderly would be the marketplace.
And what is the highest and best use of this site?
I didn't do a study on that.
How is it, considering, I'm just looking at the code on this, PIINH, nursing home, is it fair to say that the assessment department has concluded that it will be assessed as a nursing home, which infers that that is its highest and best use?
Could be.
Your land comparables, are any of them nursing homes?
Nope.
Those are my questions, thank you.
Thank you. Lynn, any questions of the assessor?
No questions.
Thank you. Neil, any questions?
No, no questions.
Thank you, and I have no questions either. I guess I should confirm the recommendation is, would be institutional taxable school exempt would be 13,522,000.
Yes.
And the taxable portion would be 586,000 for a total of $14,108,000.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, what was the first number, 13,000,000?
522,000.
22.
I should have asked you if you were in agreement with the recommendation,
Oh.
Mr. Duval.
Have I ever? Well, yes.
Sometimes.
Yesterday we had one, it's fine. I had one.
Okay, Mr. Neufeld, when you're ready.
Thank you. So many of the issues that I've discussed previously are still in effect with this, and a new issue for this is, we heard 450 River and an acknowledgement that some of the land along the river is unusable and likely would not add anything to value. I'm paraphrasing the comments, my words, not the assessors. I think in this case, in that case, it was approximately 58,000 square feet, and here we have an excess land of 39,000 square feet, and if you look at the pictures of the site, the irregular shape of it, I don't think it's difficult to imagine that there's 39,000 square feet of unusable land on this site that is not under rebuilding. Looking at the proximity to the river, for ease of interpretation, on my page 8-9, I have a line that I've drawn across at the narrow point of the lot, and you see that that's 271 feet from one side of the river to the other. And the riverbed and lands extending 350 feet on each side of the bed for the LaSalle and Seine, when this is on the Seine, would be called protected areas, and basically it requires permits and additional footing. Generally, for all practical purposes, no construction within 200 feet of the river, regardless. And that would be as the elevation at normal summer water level. And the subject lands appear to be really on the edge of that, but the lands between that and the river are not buildable, and they provide no aesthetic increase in value because we're a riverfront location. The method of getting into a personal care home is through an institutional process. It's not, I think I'd like to be in a nice one on the river. Anyone who's had the misfortune of having to put a relative into a home like this knows you don't get the choice. You gotta take what's available. So my position on the land is altered slightly since looking at that first presentation. I think there should be no assessment whatsoever for the taxable institutional, because in other cases they've removed the riverfront, and in this case they haven't, so I'm requesting 0 on that principle alone, and the other things we've discussed today. Now, as to the property itself, again, I've mentioned the concept of the highest and best use, which is key to any valuation. It's the first thing you decide. If you're valuing it as a personal care home, then you've got to do your value as a personal care home. You can't take shopping center land and say it's the same thing, because it's not. Once that personal care home is on the site, your highest and best use changes. The land itself upon which this personal care home is on now gets viewed in a different light. And I wouldn't necessarily disagree with a value. I know that the assessor's land value is $900,000 an acre, $945,000 an acre. That's very much on the high side for development land on St. Anne's. Impacted by a river, but it's not uncommon to have land at least in the $400,000 to $600,000 per acre range as development land. But as I said, once you put personal care home on it, you've changed the highest and best use. You can't ignore it and say, I'm going to ignore there's a personal care home on it and just take the land as vacant. Once it's on, it's there. You can't do that. You've changed the whole highest and best use. So now if you build a shopping center on it, that's fine. We would have a different issue. But it's changed, and so there will be another case further on where you can see the concept of the zoning designation and the change in use at $150,000 an acre, and in my mind that's an acceptable number, $150 an acre in the cost approach. As I mentioned earlier, this is a prototype home, so this is the one that the WHA is now looking at building on all the sites they can. It's an 80-bed unit. It's large enough to allow for utilization of the overhead numbers, which is, if you have attending doctors, and you're either bringing in or stationing them on site, it reaches the point where it's viable to do that. And it's also, it's a staff issue, it's viable. If you have a number that's below that, you're having labor waste, and if you have a number that's above that, you have overcrowding. And these are the things that they're dealing with, and I rather think it's unfair when you hear stories about PCH when I know from the inside that this is what they're doing. They're building respectful homes, 80-bed homes, and they're spending $130,000 a bed, $10,400. That's a current number for 18. And you can see from the cost approach that their total input was, and don't disagree, it was with the permit that the assessor brought forward, but that did include equipment and fixtures and accessories, furniture, fixture, and equipment that related to the business. So the 10,400 would be the regional cost you're looking at. And this is based on, we have several new projects, and they have several new projects on the go. You probably read the news, there's 6 new homes planned for rural Manitoba, all pretty much based on this prototype design. And those are the costs they're looking at on the real estate portion. We go back to our concept of depreciation. Now, this right type of depreciation, doesn't matter what Marshall and Swift says, because they're not recognized, their depreciation is not recognized by the Appraisal Institute, or to my knowledge, they're not recognized by the IAAO. We only recognize straight line, because we can't get into this debate about, if you ever read Marshall and Swift standards, there's an assumption in those standards. And that assumption is that renewal will take place at regular intervals in the process, which means that we're assuming that 7 years in, you're replacing all of your interior furnishings. At 20 years in, you're replacing your windows. At 25 years in, you're replacing your roof. Those are the assumptions they make, and what happens with that is that remaining economic life, which is, I believe, is about 45 years, ends up getting extended to maybe 60 years and 70 years based on improving it. So the Institute doesn't recognize that because that is an assumption, and that's not how a cost approach is supposed to be done. We do straight line. So basically, we have a 13-year-old property on a 45-year life, and that depreciation should be physically 28.8%. The next concern is to look at functional obsolescence. It's no good for anything else. I mean, one thought I'd heard of was a concept of a student dorm, which wouldn't be a bad building for a student dorm, but it's a bad location for a student dorm. You can see that on Pembina Highway, for example, right now at Bison, there's a big student facility going up, self-contained units, small bedroom units. That's a good location for it. This isn't, because you have to be close to the bus to have a student dorm. So on functional obsolescence, I would refer back to the theory discussed in the Gulf Dome case, which was when you build a specialized structure, you're going to have to expect 50% out the door. Part of it's physical, part of it's functional and economic. And that's all we've done on the cost side. So now we have a value of $5,200,000, and I apologize, we did these rather hastily. I'm going to give you a verbal number for the land component on that, which is $300,000. And that's based on $150,000 an acre as encumbered by a PCH. So my value I'm requesting is $5,500,000 Class 40S, and Class 40T we're requesting 0 to acknowledge setbacks. And on a per bed basis, as you can see our calculation above, that comes up to $65,000. In our previous studies, which I haven't presented, because I did a dry run on these with some ex-members of the board, just to see if they could understand what I was doing. And I even gave them some beverages to help with their understanding ability. And it was difficult. This is a very difficult financial analysis based on the funding and the capital reserve, the capital cost contribution. But the issue is that this really goes in line with our analysis of what the funding would relate to on a cost per bed basis if we did an income approach. And remembering that the income approach then can disregard all this functional obsolescence and physical obsolescence, because we're all getting the same funding on these. Now in Manitoba, as I said, the last 2 transactions for PCH have been bankruptcy, repossessions, and salvage value for $1. There were a few previous sales with some REITs buying up some of the PCH homes, but generally they're not preferring Manitoba as a market for their style of work. They're preferring less government-assisted rates in other provinces because they have greater freedom on income, on revenue. In other provinces, it's surprising that the funding numbers are almost the same across the country, between $71,000 and $73,000 per bed. And the difference being is that some locations will allow extra billing on this, whereas Manitoba is on a fixed formula. There are some, as I mentioned earlier, there's some small changes that are going to occur with that. And you're going to hear about another property to come, Falcon Ridge, and they do take outside funding to contribution, but they don't spend it on care. It's spent on amenities, such as having the bus and bringing in people to the site for visitations and having greater amenities, volunteer style basis. Thank you, that's my presentation.
Thank you. Mr. Barakis, any questions of the appellant?
Yeah. On page 9, you've got, here, showing the riverbed and the setbacks and everything. So it says it's a regulated area.
Right, all riverbeds are regulated, and it's the Navigation Protection Act, which is a federal act.
Okay.
Waterways in Canada are controlled by the federal government. And then the second level will be fisheries and streams. For fish, that's provincial. And then you have the city who have regulations for building development. So it's a 3-level regulation.
Okay. So it says it's regulated. Is there anything here saying it's like unbuildable?
As I mentioned earlier, that the functional number is 200 feet. A permit will never be allowed within 200 feet of a river.
But for this one, it looks like they did.
I'm gonna say, yeah, I think that's quite possible. They went closer than 200 feet. And that just means that it's a legal non-conforming use.
Okay.
And probably some of it had to do with it being on the Seine. And the Save Our Seine movement ended up really pushing the 200-foot setback, but that's been more in recent years than now. The Seine has got so many changes that have happened to it, but along the Red and Assiniboine, it's stringently enforced, and I think the Seine is now matching that enforcement.
And you've used 65,000 per bed. Does that fluctuate at all in regards to the year built, or the quality of the building, or the condition of the building?
No, I think not. I think the only fluctuation you should be looking at is, as I mentioned earlier, if you're looking at an income style approach, is where you have multiple beds per room, because the funding changes slightly and the costs change, and they tend to be older units, and which means that they also tend to be more expensive to operate. So the funding formula is pretty much set up that the government pays for everything, right? So what happens in the older ones is they might be a little cheaper on the capital side, the taxes are lower, but they're spending more money on repairs.
Do you have a chance to inspect the property?
This one I've never been in.
Those are my questions.
You had
Thank
Thank you.
Well, I keep rambling on, maybe someone's gonna say, you're senile, get over there.
Okay, Neil, any questions of you?
No.
Okay, thank you. Lynn?
I do. This is looping back to the issue of that excess land similar to River Road.
Yes.
Does this property, does the owner of this property, or the WRJ, I don't know exactly, do they actually own the land all the way down to the river?
No, they own, I think the assessor's sketch is clear, I have the same sketch, it's page 3, I have it in here somewhere. There's a public reserve behind it, and I think that's the city who owns that land to the rear. They only have what's in the blue lines.
So, That little piece then, that's sort of in behind the buildings up against the blue line,
Yes.
that's what you're suggesting is a $300,000
Well,
value of non-exempt,
in this case,
or
right.
non-exempt property?
In this case, what we have done with this property in years past is, I do have a better picture on page 10 of my report, is we have done a few more measurements, and you can see that on our picture on page 10 is the north and south boundaries of the property have a public reserve between them and the same river. And that public reserve is below the 200-foot setback. So the land that goes up to the building, my estimates were somewhere around 125 feet from the river, and that's unusable land. So what we're saying is that area inside their property line, surrounding the property, along all sides, is my estimate is probably a bit of about an acre of land that is unbuildable, unusable, and by setbacks. Now, within the setbacks, you can often put in parking. Yeah, I'm not sure if it requires a variance to put in the parking, because it's a non-permanent structure, but of course, there's no space here to put in parking, so that's not an issue we can deal with.
So it is slightly different than from the Foyer Valade property in that this, within the blue and the accessible portion of the land, relates to the excess over the .081 hectares. And Foyer Valade also had all that other land up against the river, which the assessor just did not include a value on at all.
Yeah, they had the River Road one has more land. It has two sets of buildings on it, and so it had some additional land that was south of the building. And the assessor, I believe in his question, simply said that that was part of the operation, and okay, and he said it's not excess land, it's just part of the operation, fine. In this case, perhaps the same comment is true, that you could say it's part of the operation, but it's impacted by setbacks and unbuildable. So I think that it's the same in that they're both affected by river setbacks, and it's just a question of placement and amount.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Lynn. Okay, Mr. Neufeld, regarding the setbacks, with application, would they be able to develop anything?
No, it's never been allowed,
So-
unless sure, I take that back, it'd be like a non-permanent structure.
Okay.
You could get like a boathouse.
Okay. So I'm hesitant to introduce evidence here, but to your knowledge, when you look in St. Norbert on the east side of Pembina Highway,
Right.
those condos are built right on the river. So they would seem to be within less than.
Now, are there the condos on where the convent is?
No, back towards the perimeter. We've got 3 new.
Oh, there, no, yeah, I know which ones you're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, I hesitate.
I did the measurement on them, 200 feet.
It is 200.
Yeah, and
Okay.
the key there was, like I lived in St. Norbert for a
Yeah.
few years, and I always got to see the flooding every year, and it came up there, but the key is from page 9, the elevation at normal summer water level. And for that property, they actually bought a second property to get density up to where they wanted to, but you'll find that it's 200. And then within the 200, they had to do piles down a fair bit deeper than normal.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, okay, so just to confirm, the number you're looking at is, sorry, I've got it written here. So you assigned a value, I'm looking at page 1 of your summary, you changed that to $300,000 but that should not be taxable, right?
The 300 is the land under the personal care home, which is the 2 acres that they actually use.
So your total value you're requesting is $5,500,000.
That's correct.
Okay, and
As taxable no school.
And it should be 40 T&E, taxable exempt, right?
Yeah, and then 0
T,
40 T.
okay. Okay. That's my only question, okay. Any requirement for summary? Mr. Baracus, you good? Okay, Mr. Neufeld, you're okay?
Fine.
Thank you.
Could I just jet to the washroom real quick?
Yes, yeah, you know, we're gonna take a, let's take a 5-minute break, recess for 7 minutes, how's that? Okay, call the hearing back to order. Next property on the docket is 1265 Lee Boulevard, and we're dealing with a 2020 realty assessment. Mr. Baracus, when you're ready, please.
Okay, roll number 0309145130, 1265 Lee Boulevard, another personal care home. Assessed value, school tax exempt, they have it $11,531,000. The taxable value, now we've got $2,325,000. Built in 2011, construction class D, wood or steel frame exterior walls. Land area is 245,535. So the taxable portion is what you see on page 11, where we've used 1468 on the net rate per square foot. This property is zoned RMFS. The comparables are found on page 8. You'll recognize these comparables from our earlier brief with similar zoning. So we've applied the A7120 exemption as per the 0.81 hectare direction from the Municipal Assessment Act. And then the rest of the land gets allocated into the taxable classification. So it's personal care home, Lee Boulevard here. And it's done by cost. It's been done by cost for a while. Last 2 times I went to the board, the decisions are on page 16 and 18, showing confirmation. And on page 15, there's a permit for the property. Total project value $18 million on it, dated July 5th, 2010. That's my evidence, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Baracus. Mr. Neufeld, any questions of the assessor?
Yes, sorry. Same questions as before, that I'm assuming the highest and best use, it's being assessed as a nursing home, so it's a nursing home, the inference, I'm assuming.
Yes, it is a nursing home.
And you have the bed count here?
On this one? According to your brief, it's 80 personal care beds.
Okay, and the actual land being 245,000 square feet, I take it that's comparable to 5.6 acres, and our overage is 3.6 acres.
I've got it on a square foot basis on page 11, my brief. For land valuation, we've got 158,415 on the overage for that.
Just want to make sure we're talking about the same numbers. 3.6 acres, yes, okay, and the 2 acres being school. And your comparable properties are commercial sales, is that correct?
Their sales of the same zoning, RMFS, the property on the boulevard has the same zoning as all the comparables.
Well, number 2 and number 3, sorry, or not, I take that back, number 2 and number 3 are actually a residential subdivision.
Yes, and let me clarify, like for the first property, 3 and 4, based on their shape, more highly comparable, and we fit right in between those two.
3 and 4, okay.
Yes, correct.
Now, in the case of the subject property, have you had a chance to inspect it?
Unfortunately, I haven't had the chance to inspect any of them.
Are you aware of any specialized treatment facilities on the site that require more land?
Without an inspection, I wouldn't know about that, unfortunately.
Do you know the history of I used to know this former director of PP&D who called this the cabbage patch. But are you familiar with the history of the land in this part of town?
No, I'm not.
You aware that until very recently, maybe until the houses went up, that it wasn't fully serviced?
Until the houses went up beside it? No, I'm not aware of the history of this property.
Okay. And are you aware that the property next door to it is owned by the same entity that controls the personal care home?
No, I'm not.
Are you aware that that's an educational institution?
The one next door to it?
Yes.
The one that looks like an apartment?
No, you're looking to the right, I'm looking to the left.
Oh, okay.
Former Nazarene College.
No, I didn't look into that one.
Now, do you recall what the exemption is for Institute for Educational Institutions? 10 acres?
No.
Okay, well,
Off the top of my head, you can tell us.
I'm just wondering, considering the joint ownership, has the assessment department ever considered them as and with 2 titles, is that some of their uses may overlap?
I don't have any notes indicating that, no.
That's fine. Was there any consideration for treaty land entitlement rights?
I don't have any notes in regards to that.
Would that have an impact on value if we're subject to different rights?
I'm not sure. I've never come across them.
Well, within the TLEs, there's also regulations as to usage of the TLE lands. Where they're to benefit the tribe. So I'm just wondering if you were aware of whether your department considers these rights in their valuation.
Are there any on this property in particular?
I can't answer your question until it's my
Oh,
turn, but
well, I don't know.
I'm just wondering if
I think he already answered you.
he doesn't know.
Yeah.
That was all I was wondering. Thank you. Those are my questions.
Thank you. Neil, any questions of the assessor?
No questions.
Thank you. Lynn, any questions?
No questions.
Great. And I have none either. Mr. Neufeld, when you're ready, please.
Thank you. This property is the real estate and, well, the business. Yes, the real estate is owned by Southeast Personal Care Home, who are fully owned by the, sorry, I totally forgot the name of the band. They own the Nazarene College next door. And my understanding was that their acquisition of this was based on funding provided by the Treaty Land Entitlement Rights, which is the bands that signed Treaty 1 had certain amounts of land that they could purchase and would be funded under these rights, and then they would get the funding. But within that, their acquisition of lands had to be for the benefit of the band. Now, this multi-use site is a training college for First Nations and a personal care home, predominantly used by First Nations. There are no restrictions on the usage for provincial regulations, but I've toured it, and most of the residents, well, all of the residents are First Nations. Hence the very unique design of it, which is the circle, what do they call that? Yes, thank you. That's why it's designed that way, and that's why it costs a lot more. It's still the prototypical 80 units that the WHA is using, but they configured it differently with a circular central hallway and then the wings. So the wings, if you look at them, are similar to the wings on the other properties. And again, we're focused on the 80 beds, which is optimal. There's a tremendous amount of unused space in this building. It's not as efficient as the last one we looked at. But that was a choice made by the band so that they could encompass their own visions into the architecture, which again goes to the concept of cost approach. Now, what I'm kind of wondering about something here is that religious exemptions are given if you're a denomination, but yet this one was designed to deal with the spiritual beliefs of First Nations, and we had never explored that possibility, but because they're not recognized as a religious institution. Hopefully we're a bit more enlightened in the future that we can deal with that. Now, this was built or conceived at a time when the concept of servicing was not quite in place, and they've got this massive water treatment facility on the east side, and I've toured it. I don't know if I put pictures of it in here. And that was to deal with their own water usage, and it wasn't treatment of the discharge, but that went into the costs. So they did have to deal with that. This was semi-service land until all the housing went up around it. Sorry, I have actually a picture of the treatment facility, and I just want to show you that this went into the cost. This is previous year's submission, and this went into the cost. It's fairly large right here. So, you want to look at this? That's so you wouldn't see this typically. This is a complete obsolescent structure right now, and that went into the cost, which is why we're dealing with items that you can market. Even though you're using the cost approach, your ultimate goal is to try to reach a market value with it. So I don't think a water treatment facility is needed any longer, and of course we know it isn't. And their design is such that that it was for a personal decision on its construction. So like the other site, when you look at cost new, it would be, you have to go to a reasonable, we're looking at replacement cost, not reproduction cost. Replacement is to build it with the same utility as the former building, not reproduction cost is the cost of replicating it. So on a replacement cost, it would be the same thing, $130,000 a bed. And the same numbers as before, $5.2 million on the structure. And the land, because it has now been totally encumbered by a personal care home, and there are treaty land entitlement rights to be concerned about, we're requesting a value of $150,000 per acre, and so that would indicate a 40S of $5,500,000 and a 40T of 540,000.
Pardon me.
So it's 150,000 an acre. I see there's other numbers penciled in here, but, thank you, that's my presentation. Oh, sorry, which one do you have? Oh, you don't have this one. Okay, never mind. I saw something in here from last year's I thought I was gonna point out to you, but I can't. I did the picture already. That's my presentation.
Thank you. You know, Mr. Baracus, I'll ask you right now, is there any costing for that water treatment plant in, I don't see it in
We
here.
just have one line, southeast personal care home.
Yeah, so there's the floodlight, the lighting, the paved asphalt, land valuation, land building, only for the personal, so you aren't assigning any value to that treatment plant? On the cost of it?
I don't,
No, I was using this as a response to the original building permit, that's all.
Oh, okay.
I think we're on the same page
Okay.
on the replacement cost issue.
Okay,
As a matter of fact, our number, his replacement cost is 10.7 and ours is 10.4. So we are agreeing on replacement cost, roughly, within a few dollars.
okay.
Just appreciation and land.
Neil, any questions?
Oh,
Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Baracus, yeah, I lost that.
so the property beside, that's like a condo or an apartment?
Well, the property on the east is unrelated, their apartments, it's not part of the First Nations complex, nothing at all to do with them. The one to the west is the former Nazarene College, which they're using as a training facility. Now, the land immediately in front of them, that's vacant right now, the picture is old, they're developing student dormitories on it right now.
Given the property beside it, would the subject be suitable for multifamily development if vacant?
The highest and best use of the land as vacant would reasonably be multifamily. The highest and best use of the land as currently improved would be for a personal care home, and it's being assessed on a basis of personal care home.
Those are my questions, thank you.
Thank you. Neil, any questions?
Yeah, you're talking about treaty land entitlements, and that, has this been declared an urban reserve?
No. No, but you don't need to be declared an urban reserve to exercise treaty land entitlement rights. And I haven't done a lot of work on this, but the bands have an allotment of land, and they can exercise their allotments to have either the federal government purchase or participate in the purchasing of lands to meet these pre-established goals. And for example, they bought the land on Highway 59, just north of the city, beside the golf course. It was 300 acres as part of treaty land entitlement rights for future development. It doesn't become a reserve, it's just, okay, they burned off some of their allotment.
Yeah, okay, and then how would that affect the valuation?
Because when you exercise treaty land entitlement rights, you do so on the basis of the program, and the program that they work on is that the purchase must be for the benefit of the band. It can't be for resale, it can't be for other uses, it has to benefit. And it's a bit of a stretch, some of the urban reserves, in that they want to establish commercial zones. And the question would be, how does this benefit the band? So what many of the urban reserves are contemplating is, like in Keniston, is a mixed use, to say, well, we're gonna have housing, we're gonna have daycare, we're gonna have services for the people who live there. So if they're building a community, then they're looking at the proper application of this funding method. But if they, you know, one of the issues that is arising from time to time is the concept of a casino. And my understanding is the provincial government has decided that there will be no more casinos, and especially not in the treaty lands, because one, they don't think it's part of the program, and two, we have enough casinos. There's, like I said, the more commercial the venture, the less apt it would be to be included in the program. Now, that doesn't mean the band still can't buy the land and operate it under treaty status in regards to taxation. It simply means that they can't participate in the TLE. And that's my layman's. You know, I've never done an appraisal on TLE land, so I've just worked with some projects, and so my knowledge is not as deep as it should, as it could, I should say.
Yeah, this is the first for me too. I mean, there are examples of commercial entities on land owned by bands.
Right. Well, the golf course on Inkster, the 9-hole,
Yeah.
that's owned by the band.
Yeah,
But-
as well as the
But it
gas,
provide, right,
the gas station on Highway 6.
right, and neither provide a benefit to the band members other than potentially a source of revenue. So that's a questionable call, but here we're talking about a personal care home, a college, and a dormitory.
Mhm.
There is no doubt that that is for the benefit of the band.
Yeah, but I'm still not sure how that would impact the
Oh,
valuation.
it's just an alternate use. You can't turn around and say, well, it's not working out, so, you know, I think I'll open up, I don't know, a shopping center or something, or an apartment that doesn't benefit the band.
Okay, those are my questions.
Thank you. Linda, any questions?
No question.
Okay, my only question is, so when was this purchased and how much did they purchase it for?
Oh, it was several years ago, when they purchased Nazarene College. It was a large parcel.
Okay.
I'm gonna say, almost getting on 20 years of this.
Oh, I see. Okay. All right, no other questions? Any requirement for summary? No, Mr. Newfeld? Okay, we are gonna take a 30-minute break till 12:30. So we'll take a 30-minute recess. Return at 12:30. Thanks, Michelle. I will now call the hearing back to order. Next property on the docket is, where's my master sheet here? It's up here, okay. 1 Morley Avenue. We're dealing with a 2020 assess realty deal. File numbers 19-442. Mr. Marakis, when you're ready, please.
Roll number 12-000658, 100 1 Morley Avenue, Riverview Health Center. It's got 3 lines here in terms of valuation. It's a combination of a hospital, classification, and a personal care home. So the bottom line, the school tax exempt, that's the personal care home section that we have accounted for in the property. So if you see, go to my page 11. There's a map of the property. So according to our records, the buildings A, B, C, D, that's where the personal care home section is. So we've applied the school tax exemption on that. The overall breakdown, we've applied on page 22, you see we're using $5.35 per square foot, and we've used the 87,120, which is the maximum allowable.
What page was that again?
Page 22. It's for our land valuation.
So sorry, what are you using? 520,
Yeah,
535 or?
535.
Mhm.
And we've, using on the net area, square foot, land valuation 87,120, that's the maximum, that's the 0.81 hectares. We've applied to it. And then we've got, I'm just going to go line by line, so we can cross off that way, because there's a few things going on here. If you go to page 18, we've got the depreciated costs. If you look at the second row of buildings, buildings 7 and 8, now that's what we have allotted as a personal care home. So we have those, that's where the building value comes from, depreciated building value added to the value of the land on the taxable no school. That's how we come up with our 15,653 for the taxable no school. So we're applying the max we can as per legislation on those properties, and we're only accounting school tax exemption for those areas allocated as the personal care home. The next line up.
Sorry, Matthew, which number, building number are we?
Oh, okay, so 7 and 8. If you go to my page.
No, I
Yeah, got
understand
it.
that, but in this costing on page 18,
Yep.
which is the personal care?
Oh, okay, so the second row of data here says building, sorry, the second bold row, building numbers, 7 and 8. You'll see it says
Oh, I
1
see.
through B,
Okay,
and
I'm
it
sorry.
says
There we go.
PCH, so those are the.
And so
Got it.
it's the
Okay.
RCMLD is the number,
yes.
the last number?
Yeah, that's less depreciation.
I'm gonna offer something to speed this along.
Mhm.
We're only gonna have one question, and the whole issue of the appeal is that there's a changing number of beds from hospital to PCH and vice versa, which we're discussing with the assessor right now. So I'm not even gonna ask you to make a decision on this property. If that helps you with your questioning.
So you're asking us to confirm it?
I just allow you to ask the assessor one question.
Okay,
And
we'll
then
make our
answer.
decision
Yeah.
based on, okay, sorry, yeah. Okay, well, maybe a quick overview. I think.
Okay.
Yeah, quickly, yeah.
Okay, so the rest of it is exempt up to the maximum hospital allowable exemption, which is 4.047 hectares. So that's been applied. Every other building on this property we've exempted, as well as hospital. And the remainder of the land that is in excess of the legislative max hospital and personal care home exemptions has been given the taxable liability on it. So, page 7, it's zoned EI, educational institutional, large and significant multi-building public, quasi-public, or private facilities, non-commercial character, significant impacts on surrounding areas. So these properties, they don't transact a whole heck of a lot. So if you go to page 8, I was looking for sales of EI, couldn't find any, so here are the permitted uses. Permitted principal uses for EI zone districts, and they're multifamily, assisted living, care home, dormitory, so on and so forth. Institutions that are residential or more social in nature. Least cost approach on this, sales I use are located on page 19. So these are all multifamily, as it was something that was on the list from page 8 for permitted principal uses of VI zone districts. So this is a big piece of property, much more unique. You're not gonna find sales of this property. So, of sales of properties this size, that are good paired sales. So the comps range from 15 to 20 on the sale price per square foot. We're at 534. We're much lower, but economies of scale, it does make sense that we are 3 times lower. So we've applied the max exemptions when applicable, and the personal care homes have been given their respective school tax exemption. The principal uses table is found in the middle of my brief, and we go to the end of my brief. We've got just criticisms from last go around. Confirmation was asked at 43 million, and then 2017, it was confirmed with no tax liability change either at 57 million. Cost was used in both, and that's what I'm asking for the methodology to be for this and other properties today. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Neufeld.
Actually, it turns out I have 2 questions.
Your one question.
Yeah,
Oh, 2 questions.
It's his fault, by the way.
Okay.
When you're talking about economy of scale, do you consider the parcel that exceeds the exempt amount, or do you consider the whole parcel?
I'm just considering the whole parcel, just as a broad statement.
Okay, and just confirm for me that that value is $5.43 a square foot.
I think it's 534.
I'm sorry, 534, 535 a square foot
535, yes, correct.
for land that's on the river.
It's not, there's another piece of property in between it and a street, I believe. Yeah, it looks like there's like a parkway or something in between.
Okay.
But it's right adjacent to the river.
Yeah, okay. Those are my questions, thanks.
Thank you. Neil, any questions of the assessor?
No, I have no questions.
Thank you. Lynn?
No questions.
Okay. And Mr. Barakis, just to confirm on page 1, the land portion, 2,692,000, that's above the allowed exemption?
Yes.
Okay. All right. That's all my questions. Mr. Neufeld, when you're ready, please.
Thank you. First of all, we are going to ask for this to be confirmed, and that's because the issue we're dealing with in this property is there's a change in bed usage from personal care to more of a hospital use, and the assessment department is working with us on it, so there's no, and we're discussing this on very good terms, and they will make the change as part of our resolution process, because it's an issue. One, what's happened is, if you read the news, WHA is repositioning the personal care beds all around and trying to get the best yield they can. So as a result of that, more beds in Riverview will be used for hospital purposes, because it's a higher degree of care above personal care home, and they have the facilities on site. So the numbers are going to change, and we're comfortable that the city's going to deal with it, move some from school to taxable, and we'll be happy. And the last issue to point out is that the land above the exemption limit in this case is $535 a square foot, or $233,000 per acre, and originally it had been $10 million. In the first time we brought this to appeal, and the city did reduce it, not at hearing, but on the next cycle. And so this is something reasonable. This is a property that's been, as I mentioned earlier, it's a community-based, highest and best use. 233,000 an acre is a fair number. And I'm referring to the other arguments we made earlier. Thank you.
Okay. Matthew, any questions of the appellant?
Confirmation, so.
Okay. And then you okay? You okay? So, Mr. Neufeld, just out of curiosity, what you're going through with the city is it would change the, from tax or
School
taxable
exempt to fully
Yeah,
exempt.
so there'll be a shift.
Yeah.
Because of use.
Yeah, I think it's like about 40 beds, and it's also happening at Deer Lodge. And, you know, we heard the other property today on River Road, and they've got a dementia unit. And Riverview has a dementia unit, and Concordia has a dementia unit. But because Riverview, Concordia, and Deer Lodge are all classified as hospitals under the Health Services Insurance Act, when they take over that dementia treatment, it becomes a hospital treatment as opposed to a personal care style. So, you know, and the numbers change too, like with the whole issue of dealing with healthcare. But the assessor's been very good to deal with on this subject. They come and adjusted our numbers on Deer Lodge and Riverview and Concordia. We just haven't got around to it.
Okay. Thank you. That concludes 1 Morley Avenue. Next one on the docket is 1 Falcon Ridge Drive. Dealing with the 2020 realty assessment. File number is 19-4439. Mr. Baracus, when you're ready, please.
Okay. 03093003200, 1 Falcon Ridge Drive, another personal care home. We've got 3 lines of liability on this one, all class institutional. So the middle one, the 192,000, they have a religious area in there, so that's fully exempt. We have on the school exempt side, then we have applied the maximum to it in terms of school exemption. And then everything above and beyond that we've put as taxable. 3 stories, 4 sections, built from effective year built 2001, 2008, 10 to 12 average wall height. Zoning RMFL, so costed again on this one. We have, you can see the pictures of the subject property on page 3 on it. So there's some aerial shots. It's like McGilvery and Dovercourt, pretty much. Page 4 shows the zoning. It's zone RMFL, intended to accommodate the development of multifamily units, including apartments, condos, medium to high residential densities. Page 6 shows our Marshall and Swift appreciated cost report. Land sales. Land sales are on page 7. So you'll notice that I've highlighted, pardon me, one of these land sales. That's the one 1926 McGilvery, which is found, the picture's found on page 2. Happens to be right next door to the subject property. Sold in 2017. So same neighborhood characteristics. $20.82 per square foot on August 9th, 2017. Our land value on this one is $15.34. So we're $5 below the property next door. In terms of its size, it's 469,729. We're 313,426. So big properties next door to each other. Looks like our land value is good. That's my evidence. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Neufeld, any questions?
Certainly, you're talking about the property next door, and what's being constructed on it?
No, I didn't look into that, I should have.
Would you disagree with me if I said it was multifamily? Trucks I gotta drive past them every day.
Yeah.
And the subject, of course, is a personal care home?
Yes, yes, it is.
As compared to other personal care homes, is there anything different in the construction quality on this one?
I didn't
You know,
inspect
do you
this
know?
one. I couldn't tell.
Oh, okay, you haven't inspected.
I haven't inspected that, unfortunately.
Sorry, I'm just curious, the exempt portion, that's for a chapel or?
Yeah.
I guess a
Place of
synagogue?
worship, yeah, because of its,
Right.
the clientele there.
But they're not restricted on the basis of users, they're not religiously restricted. Any person of any faith can be a patient here, correct?
I would assume so.
They just can't order a cheeseburger. My father-in-law didn't want to go there because he couldn't get a cheeseburger.
Oh.
Kosher. Thank you, those are my questions.
Thank you. Neil, any questions?
No questions.
Okay, thank you. Lynn?
No questions.
Okay, so Mr. Morax, pardon me, just to confirm that, I'm looking on page one, the 3,348,000 is for,
That's just area above the, 0.81 hectares.
Okay.
That's allotted to a school exemption.
okay, that's the land.
That's land, yeah.
Or the board exemption. 192 is for the religious
Area, yes.
area, okay, and the 32,285 is for the home itself, cost depreciated, okay. A total of 35,825,000. Any history, appeal history, I guess we haven't included.
Appeal history,
17, 18, 19? Or sitting at municipal board.
okay.
Okay, so we got pending muni boards, okay. Okay. Pending muni board. Okay. That's all my questions, Mr. Neufeld, when you're ready, please.
Thank you. Slight rebuttal here, but the assessor, page 6, is cost of this is masonry bearing walls. It's a wood frame building, which would indicate that the cost approach should be revised for a cheaper construction and a lower, lesser economic life, as wood frame doesn't last as long. I saw it going up, so I know it's wood framed. As with the other properties, we're just looking at the replacement cost new, which we know to be $130,000 a bed, $26 million. And again, looking at the cost approach, 50% depreciation for a value of 13 million, which works out to 65,000 a bed, which based on our income analysis, which you haven't seen, is at the upper end of the range. As I mentioned earlier, the income analysis, everybody's got the same funding. The lowest PCH was at $14,000 a bed, the highest at $165,000 per bed. And the disparity has to be corrected. That's why these are all under appeal. For sake of argument, this is at $150 a bed, $150,000 a bed, $30 million in assessment, $32 million in assessment, 200 beds. So $160,000 a bed. We only appealed 7 properties. All the properties that were in excess of $80,000 a bed. We're just trying to get this corrected. We didn't appeal all of them because they have to pay taxes, but it has to be something that makes sense for their industry. Why would a private operator get a break? And the government, or any, the previous ones running WHA, they gotta pay full board tax. This is a private one, which is newer. Why should they pay more tax when they're competing against? And I'm gonna say something here personally, and I was joking about it earlier. My father-in-law didn't wanna go into this home because he wanted to order cheeseburgers. And so instead he was placed in a home where he was put in a shared occupancy in another bed. It was a dump. It was horrible. Government paid for both. The operators got the same amount of money to run that and provide that service regardless. So we're penalizing the people who are doing a good job at providing service. This is a good home. 1265 Lee is a good home. 735 St. Anne's is a good home. 435 River is a good home. Meanwhile, the dumps are getting subsidies from the city. And WHA's on line with this. They've said, we want equity. If that means some of these older homes have to go up, that's fine. And the newer ones have to go down. Overall, you'll probably end up being lesser. But it's also going to put everybody on the same footing. And we have, it's a healthcare issue. So our number here, incidentally, based on that, would be $13 million. Now, as far as the land is concerned, I wish we had done Morley first, because I did want that entered into evidence to show what's being done on other sites. That number is $233,000 per acre, and we decided that's reasonable. It's the highest end of the range from all the other. I've given you all the other assessments. Yes, I know we're comparing assessments, but it gives you an idea of the treatment that they should be receiving, which is based on the highest and best use, that this is a personal care home. It's not a shopping center, it's not an apartment block. 233,000 is at the higher end of the scale and fair. So our number is taxable, no school, 13,466,000, and that's 2 acres of land at 233,000 per acre, and the $13 million. Our number for taxable, which is 40T, is 5.01 acres at 233,000 an acre, or 1,167,755, rounded to 1,168,000. And the exempt portion is irrelevant, fine. No, I shouldn't say that, it's not irrelevant, it's a place of worship, it's fine, it's good. Now, this land will not be used for anything but a personal care home, and the indications are from the operators that they, perhaps down the road, are considering an expansion, and that would involve moving some of their parking, which is now on the land. So the highest and best use is encumbered as a personal care home. That's my presentation.
Thank you. Mr. Barakis, any questions?
Yeah, if the land was vacant, it would be a good candidate for multifamily development.
Yes. As developed, it's not.
And they get money from other sources in the art?
This particular organization has got a fairly active fundraising activity, and now they can't take those funds and use them for operations, and so therefore support. And I did get their financial statement and what they spend their fundraising on, and it would be for bringing in various people for, I'm trying to think what the right word would be, entertain their residents, for providing off-site services, nothing to do with real estate. It's all non-real estate related. Those are my questions, thank you.
Thank you. Lynn, any questions?
No questions.
Neil?
No questions.
Okay, so just to confirm your numbers, Mr. Neufeld, 13 million is still in play here, and what, that would be taxable school exempt?
Correct.
466,000 would be.
The land for the taxable school exempt, so you would add that up to
Okay,
get 13,466.
okay, yeah, 13.
That's on a cost approach, yes.
Okay. And the 1,168,000 would be the
40T?
institutional property taxable.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Okay. Right.
And remain, the exempt remain the same.
Okay. So, and you made a comment about the bed. I guess the assessment department isn't even considering the number of beds.
No.
No, they're just using the cost.
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah, okay, so you just do that for analysis
Well,
to
it's,
compare.
right, it's a question of, you know, when you do an appraisal on something and you're gonna do it by the income approach, but you run a direct comparison just to see if your number makes sense.
Okay. All right, that concludes number 1, Falcon Ridge Drive. Okay, next property on the docket is 1970 Henderson Highway. We're dealing with a 2020 realty assessment, file number is 19-4440. Mr. Baracus, whenever you're ready, please.
Okay, roll number 04-0024-00000. 1970 Harrison Highway, another personal care home. 3 stories, built in 1993. Construction class C, masonry, bare walls, 10-foot wall height. Zone RMFS. Got 2 lines. Again, here we've got the school tax exempt area, which I believe we have done the maximum on that. And then we also have the area that's, they're a little bit over the exemption, they're 95,564, the exemption is 87,120. So for that extra little bit of land, they get full taxes on that one. It's done by the cost approach. Page 3 is from website, just gives a description of the place, 120 bed personal care home along the bank of the Red River. Yeah, I won't read that, you guys can read it after if you like, just to get the idea on it. Page 4, pictures, place. Page 5 is the zoning, RMFS zoning. We've had a couple properties. With that, you'll note that there is some property, some parkland in behind it. So the property itself doesn't extend right to the river. The property we're talking about is the brown square on page 5 with the marker, red marker in the middle of it. 5A, 5B, that's the 3 approaches to value. We're using cost summary. Zone 5C, depreciated. The comparables, same comparables they use for other RMFS properties. The most applicable ones are comparables 3 and 4. Actually, 1 second. There's another different one in here. There's Roblin. There's one on Kingsbury too. That's sold at $19.39 square foot in Garden City. This one we're at $14.35. So we fit in between the comps we've seen before, comparables 1 and comparable number 3, the one on Roblin, and also the property comparable one on Beaver Hill, which we've looked at. Subject property detached, structure details depreciated are also on page 7 with the land valuation. Excerpt from the Municipal Assessment Act, we've talked about that on 8A for the exemption. And then just the end, just past decisions. Request for confirmation in 2018 and 2017. It was confirmed neither value nor classification was changed, and that's what I'm asking for today. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Marcus. Okay. Any questions of the assessor, Mr. Newfeld?
Yes. Just a sec. On several of the previous assessments done in the cost approach, you've used values in excess of $200 a square foot. For example, the last one, the larger one on Falcon Ridge, the replacement cost new was about 220 a foot. Now, this one, I'm just gonna do the math here. Your replacement cost new is 175 a foot. Shouldn't they be consistent? Like, and this one, the previous one, I'm gonna suggest should have been lower than this one. I'm not really concerned with this particular one. Why is there such a wide variance in RCN?
They're different ages. This one's
No, RCN has nothing to do with age. Replacement cost new.
replacement cost. Yeah.
That's depreciation we're dealing with later, right? Morley doesn't count.
It was the specs were entered into our system in Marshall and Swift came up with a replacement cost.
He's just blaming Marshall and Swift.
Well, that's who did the number.
Well, I'm just concerned because this one is, obviously, there's something wrong here if you can have one of your smallest properties have the lowest rates per square foot and your largest one, which we just heard, being significantly higher.
Maybe there was a quality component to it. That's
Okay,
different.
well, but how could that be when you're dealing with the replacement cost new? Aren't you looking at utility rather than reproduction?
All I can tell you is the replacement cost new is generated from our Marshall and Swift.
Okay, I'm looking at another one that's, the one on St. Anne's, which is roughly $240 a foot. So just, I guess I'll reformulate my question, shouldn't there be some consistency and on these?
It was taken from the Marshall and Swift,
Okay.
that's all I can tell you.
But there's no, and I don't wanna beat this thing to death, and I'm not after you personally here, but isn't there a code then you could show us on the Marshall and Swift costing that would indicate what was entered as your input? And that hasn't been provided, has it?
No.
Okay. Now, in the case of this one, you're approximately 40% depreciation, correct, for
37%.
37%, and that's just physical?
Yes.
Okay. Those are my questions, thank you.
Mr. Newfeld. Neil, any questions of the assessor?
No.
Lynn, any questions?
No questions.
And I don't think. Yeah, the one question, when you referred to the orders in the back, you said something about change in classification?
No, I was just saying it was sought by appellants in the past, and the classification was confirmed.
Oh, okay, confirmed. Okay, thank you, that's my only question. Mr. Newfeld, when you're ready, please.
This property was just on the cusp of our study for being whether we were going to appeal it or not. This is one of the lower assessed properties. I mentioned that we had, I think, 7 or 8 that we had looked at, we had concerns about. And so this one is at 67,000 a bed. And our belief was that we should be looking at a range, as I said earlier, between 40 and 65,000 per bed. And in this particular case, there's very little wrong with the assessment. Our analysis, for example, we had a appreciated replacement cost new, which was 7.8 million, just based on the new cost to build. When we add in the land, and we were willing to, we looked at the 233,000 an acre on Morley. That comes, adding the land of 466,000 in, that comes to a value of 8,266,000 versus the assessor's 8,112,000. So we're actually a touch higher on that basis. There might be greater depreciation to consider. So we are not requesting a change in 40S, I should say, because it's virtually the same. We are requesting an adjustment on the 40T at the same rate, which is $535 a square foot. The land above the 2 acres is 8,444 square feet. And at $535 a square foot, that should be $45,175, rounded to $45,000. So that's our only requested change, is to take the taxable from 121,000 down to 45,000. And I have some closing comments later, but that's, just make this one real quick.
Okay. Mr. Barakis, any questions?
I don't have any questions.
Thank you. Lynn, any questions?
No questions.
Thank you. Neil, any questions?
No.
Okay. So I just need clarification on the requested numbers, Mr.
Confirm the 40S
At,
8112
okay?
and reduce 40T to $45,000.
From 121.
Correct.
Okay. Okay. And, sorry, and then requested adjustment downwards for the 40T to 45,000, right?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. And our new total would be 8,112,000 plus 45. $8,157,000. Okay. And my last question, it's kind of relevant, or about all the appeals today except for this one. You requested, this is a general question.
Yes.
Your requested values are about 60% less than the assessed value? We'll say 50%
Sure.
less? Okay. And you're using the bid funding rate to come up with?
Well, the bed funding and
Depreciation.
and the cost new with 50% depreciation,
Okay.
just because of the unique structure, a unique property, where you have to consider physical, functional, and economic obsolescence all in one. There's another municipal board order on another interesting, unique property, Assisipi Ski Hill. Now, a ski hill in Manitoba. In that particular case, the depreciation came out to 48%. The same concept was embraced. It's like, yeah, it's what else are you gonna do with this property? So there is case law precedent on this in terms of recognizing a unique building with limited appeal to the market, general real estate market.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Barakis, any requirement for summary on this one, or in general?
Done my cost.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I should do that.
And this is the last one, right?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm not gonna bore you to death. I got a correction to make. I did look up the treaty land entitlement rights, and my quick reading of it was that if you apply those rights, you have to bring the land into treaty status or into the reserve. So in the case of Lee, whatever comments I made, I just retract them and say but it is owned by a First Nations band, it is governed by a First Nations band, and their mandate, which can't be changed without the band approving, is to run this for the benefit of the band, which is the same as the title restriction. So I don't like making errors on those sorts of things. Secondly, all of these properties today are at the municipal board dating back, some are actually, we have 2015 appeals for new construction. The rest of them started in 2017, and we are having excellent discussions with the assessment department on this. It's just not the top of anybody's list of things to do. We hope to bring it forward in March. We have a series of case management cases to discuss this, and the discussions have been interesting. We're looking at a wholesale change in the way these are done, and to move away from the cost approach to something that's more equitable. But we don't want that to change if we find flaws in it, that there's another mistake down the road, or the other stakeholders in this have a complaint. But there's one very important issue here. There is only one taxpayer stakeholder. It's only the WHA. They pay for all of this. So we do speak with one voice. So it's not a question of, you remember the issue with the hotels moving from cost approach to income approach, one wanted it, one didn't, depended on how it would benefit them. We're coming as representing the WHA, the people who are paying all the funds on this, and looking to change this to something that works better, and that actually encourages new construction of personal care homes instead of penalizing construction of new care homes. And yeah, I'm a little bit on that soapbox. I'm not under any illusion that the board is going to make a change. I wish you would. I know that it's generally your belief that, well, if it's going to be handled there, we're going to let those guys deal with it. That's a reality of our system. Maybe this is my dress rehearsal. I don't know. I've had a lot of them. I've had 6 years of dress rehearsals. What would be nice to do is to correct the land imbalance issue. And the issue is clear that once you've established a property as being part of the highest and best use is to benefit the community, whether it's a park, an airport, a library, a personal care home, a hospital, a school, you've impacted the rights on that property. You can no longer say it could be a shopping center. It's now a school or whatever it is. And as a result, the value has to be, highest and best use has to be considered with that. We have, and I know this is a bit of an equity base, but there's probably 100 properties in the city that are enjoying a excess land value that's somewhere between $80,000 and $233,000 per acre. And we have 4 today that do not. And there's not a coincidence that I'm bringing those 4 to appeal. I would like, at the very minimum, to correct that imbalance. And then we can move on to seeing what we can do in the future on a collaborative basis with the assessor. And point out that one Morley, which you saw today, has already been through this process, and there was an acknowledgement that an assessment of $10 million for 10 acres of excess land was a bit too much, and that's now 233,000. So at the bare minimum, I'd like to consider that, and, you know, you can always hope that you're gonna be a search or independent authority and look at the concept from the other point of view. Thank you very much
Okay.
for your patience
I have a
today.
question for you.
Yes.
Any idea if there's any intention from the province to change the act to,
Absolutely, we know it's coming.
okay.
And what's, the change is that there's a little bit of movement towards getting some of the private and charitable organizations to push them to raise their own money to get into operations, to relieve the province of the burden.
Just curious.
Nothing beyond an administrative level has happened yet, but politics is politics.
Yeah, okay. Thanks, Mr. Newfeld.
May I just
Mr.
ask a
Brook.
question?
Of course.
I'm sorry, when you said that there is movement on behalf of the province, how do you know that?
Oh, I had, what was the second last property we had? I was just glancing, there was a newspaper article about.
Falcon Ridge?
Falcon Ridge, about, yes, Falcon Ridge, about their plans on changing it. And enough, there's been no act, as far as I know right now, to do this. And on that basis, remember, I am not a spokesperson for anybody. I'm not speaking for WRHA, because I'm not allowed to make statements like that. I'm just telling you what's in the news. When they were announcing funding changes in building the 6 rural PCH homes, they were discussing some changes to the funding. Okay, it's coming back to me. What they want to try to do in a change in the funding is deal with a charitable institution and get them to locally raise a minimum of 10% of the funding, and then they would step in with the balance of the funding. And this would allow them a little bit of savings on the construction end, and then they would deal with the operating end, which is why moving to an income-based model makes more sense now, because on a cost point of view, we're going to have a sort of a charitable fundraising event, but you're still going to get the same funding on your bed.
Okay. Thanks, Mr. Newfeld. That
Yeah.
concludes our hearing today.